9. This Friday good. Author's notes. My profile has a link to a forum for this story. Many thanks to GJ Mega for editing this. Aramaic and all of its forms is a language that evolved over thousands of years. What I take from it is a picture from one spot in time. It is more Phoenician than anything else, I suppose. I do not pretend to know anything about the language. It's called Google. The dripping blood our only drink, the bloody flesh our only food. In spite of which we like to think that we are sound, substantial flesh and blood again, in spite of that, we call this Friday good. T. S. Eliot. It was Friday, the night of the new moon. Yesterday they had gotten the center of his usual clearing ready for the ritual. The center had been carefully tilled and smoothed over into a circle about 5 feet in diameter. The fresh dirt would not be disturbed until Harry stepped inside to start the ritual. None of this was necessary according to the book, but it had been done in several of the examples. Mr. Steele figured it was better to err on the side of caution. The boys had gathered a handful each of wildflowers and spread them about the outside. The boys had tried to joke about being flower girls, but it had come out awkward, and the joke was soon dropped. It was hard to laugh about what they were doing. None of them liked that Harry would have to do this alone. He thought they were rather of the opinion that he was going to slit his own throat, or something, though he morbidly wondered if there was going to be much difference in the pain he was about to feel. Harry himself was glad he was alone. No one would have to see what he was doing if he messed up, if he lost his courage. No one would see him if he cried. The book simply said no other person or intelligent magical creature should be present. It implied that it had to do with thoughts. Nothing might go wrong, but something could if the audience had a strong enough thought. It could affect the function of the rune. The book had not specified how far away people would need to be, but Mr. Steele had decided that they would all stay inside the house. If Harry wasn't back by dawn, they would come for him. He did not want anyone risking messing up the ritual. But what if he goes unconscious? Couldn't he, I don't know, bleed to death? That was Tiny's question. The poor boy had regretted it right away, of course, as he was immediately on the receiving end of several harsh glares. Harry did not even turn to look, but merely replied in a calm voice. The cuts heal immediately. It's part of the magic. There was nothing else to say to that. Ankh, Mem, the 2 runes he would cut tonight. Mr. Steele had had no doubt that he was capable of both. Harry wasn't inclined to disagree. It should be fairly simple, right? It was a little tricky, getting the perfect loop at the top, but with a mental hand there were no trembling fingers. Mem would be no harder. He would simply follow his scar, and then curve the tail over his right eyebrow, almost into the hairline. It would not be super noticeable. It had taken some thought to figure out whether to draw the symbol as if looking from the inside, like in a mirror, or from the outside. Finally, they had decided on from the outside, as that was the view he would have from the dagger. Best keep things simple, right? So simple. Enough self-pity. Harry mentally slapped himself. He felt like a pathetic child, whining about life not being fair. He had to stop being so moody and just get this over with. He was making the whole house miserable. He tried to sit up straight, pull his shoulders back. This was the start of a powerful spell. He should be proud of the opportunity to become more than he was, more than he could have been. Think positive. He could protect his friends, his pseudo-brothers. They had been supportive of him, had not thought evil of him for being a wizard. They liked him, cared for him as much as he did for them. He hadn't been told, but he had seen what care had come home with a few days ago. While he was locked up with Mr. Steele, the boys had been target shooting. How they had gotten illegal firearms was anyone's guess, but they had. He could only assume they planned to do their own part. Ankh, Mem, Ankh, Mem. He went over the figures in his mind. Each one would have to be carved carefully and then pronounced out loud while willing his magic to take on the properties represented by the mark. It all sounded simple, too simple. It would probably get just as out of hand as the knife had before when it had been activated. He was uncertain of what to expect. Harry, eat. The words made him look up from staring blankly at his plate. Care was smiling gently at him. Harry smiled back and made the effort to shovel in some more food. He wasn't truly hungry, he was too nervous, but he could appreciate the sentiment. Before he was ready, dinner was over and boys were awkwardly looking at each other. Finally, Mr. Steele stood. Well, come now, Harry, I will walk with you. But not stay to watch his work. The thought was unjustified. Harry tried to put it from his mind. He accepted the good lucks from the boys and even managed a smile at Mike's comment. "Don't cut off a finger, Skinny. You need those to cook for us." Care clapped him on the shoulder, and then Harry was through the door and outside, walking silently beside Mr. Steele towards the clearing. The walk did not take as long as it usually felt like it did. This time there was no anticipation of flight, only dread. He truly had picked an appropriate name for his ritual knife. As they reached the clearing, Mr. Steele stopped. He turned to look at Harry, reaching out a hand to touch his hand lightly. "This is your chance. Harry say you do not want to, and we will never speak of it. We will search for another way. This is your choice." Why did he feel as if this was Mr. Steele taking the burden off his own shoulders and putting the weight of the responsibility on his own? If anything went wrong, it would be Harry's own fault for going along with it. Harry's choice. Harry's responsibility. Harry's burden. Harry's fault. Harry's choice that was no choice at all. A stab of anger flared once at being herded this way, indirectly trapped, before sinking again into a glum and fatal acceptance. What difference did Mr. Steele trying to scrub his own conscience make, after all, if Harry was about to say yes all the same? There was no other way that they knew of. They did not have any other books, any other knowledge. They did not know enough about anything. This could be some fatal mistake, and they would never know why, or if it was even worth it. But it could also save them if the wizards were truly hostile. It could make all the difference in the world. The thought looped inside his head like that snake that ate its own tail, making him vaguely nauseous. Ouroboros. Harry gripped his knife tighter. "I know, sir. I'm willing." Not truly ready, but willing nevertheless. Mr. Steele smiled in what looked like relief, and then gave him a nod. Harry felt an irrational annoyance that Mr. Steele could feel relief at all right now, where the pain was still to come for him. "Very well. I will see you soon." No platitudes, at least. As he watched the other man walk away, never looking back, Harry nodded to himself. It was time. Mr. Steele sat at his desk downstairs. He knew no sleep would come to him while the boy was outside. He had no idea how long this would take. He found himself feeling guilty, but it was the boy's choice. He had not forced him to do anything, but merely gave him all the options at their disposal. And the ritual would not truly harm him, and with time would even improve his state of being. It was just like that tattoo, for what boy wouldn't love to fly? It was worth doing, he knew it. And Harry knew it too, or he would not have gone along with the plan. He told himself this, over and over, as he waited. It's for the best. Harry stepped carefully into the circle, holding dread in his hand. He knelt in the center, and then carefully set the knife on his shins as he unbuttoned his shirt. He pulled it off, and then tossed it outside the circle. He felt the ever-present itch on his back and released his wings. He did not want to be distracted this night. He furled them about himself as best he could, letting their silky texture bring him some measure of comfort. His breathing was coming fast, and he tried to calm it as he lifted dread and looking into the sparkling eyes. "Awaken, giving great fear in troubled times. I have need of you." The sound was sibilant, and the snakes came alive at once, curling in ecstatic patterns, their hisses jubilant. "We arise in darkest night to do your bidding, winged speaker of snakes. What is thy will?" He didn't think he would ever get used to the way snakes talk. "This darkest night, we will begin the journey. Ankh will take its place in the heart and Mem the mind." Well, that came out a bit clearer. The snakes hissed as one, and Harry let his eyes fall closed, reaching with his magic out to the knife. He could almost sense one mind, a magical upwelling within the blade that reminded him of a star of his own power, which he supposed it was. Before he could think much on it, his mind abruptly shifted. He was once more outside his body, a part of dread. No, he was dread. He was giving great fear in troubled times. All of his own fear fell away, replaced with a sense of direct purpose. Blood. Yes. That is where the life magic is. Some distant part of him tried to rebel, but it was too small and too late. With almost surgical precision, the tip of the blade hovered about his heart, on the left side of his chest. He could see the light spilling forth, circling through his body, pooling in his hands and wings. It did exist throughout his body, he could see now, just not at the level as before. The dark spaces in between were cool and comforting, the stars sparkling bright. He was simply creating a new light star, a new pattern for the magic blood life to follow. Ankh, eternity. Ankh, life. Ankh. He could see the symbol so clearly in his mind. The knife moved downwards to the bottom of the well of light over his heart, and with a burning precision cut deep, moving up to the center. At the center, it curved to the right, making a loop to the top of his heart, and then back down to meet in the center. The knife lifted up for a bare second, before slashing forward in one quick movement, making a deep slash across the center, completing Ankh. Ankh. It was said in a rush of air, and how odd it was to see himself speaking. Oh, he could see it now. He could, the magic welling forth, exploring this new thing, this new path. His will was steel, as sharp and strong as the wings on his back. This Ankh meant eternity to his magic, an infinite circle. A loop that his magic would forever follow, bursting forth and bouncing back always forever, for eternity. It would keep his life, keep it safe within. Ankh, the start of the path, the beginning of a set that would stretch across his body, across time. For a second he could almost see that future, could see himself, a man, wings spread as runic stars glittered across his self, lighting up the blackest night, soaking in the greatest light, existing until the hour at all ends, and the words made sense, they echoed inside himself. Then it was over. With an abrupt feeling of loss, he was himself, kneeling in the cold dirt, wings heavy on his back. His chest ached fiercely, and dread was still in his hand. He felt both exhausted and energetic at the same time, pulled in two directions. He now knew with certainty that Mem would not be done tonight. With a new sense of purpose he stood. Now Mem would be on the full moon, and after that Zion and Heth and Samek, on, a rune for each circle, a rebirth as the moon waxed and waned. It all made so much sense now. He could see it clearly in his mind. This was wonderful, this was great, this was right. This was who he was meant to be. Who cares for a year's weakness? He had so much to accomplish, a sense of purpose. He barely remembered to draw his wings back in as he leapt from the circle. Dread was bared in his hand as he walked back to the house, the box and clothes left behind with barely a thought. So much to think about, to do, to be. Ankh. Tiny couldn't sleep. The thought of what Harry must be going through scared him. He felt so guilty for the way he had been feeling before. When he heard steps on the stairs, he abruptly jumped from his bed and peeked through his door. The steps were coming closer. When Harry came into sight, Tiny felt fear burst from him, and he froze stock still in terror. The boy was no longer wearing his coat or shirt. His shoes were missing too, somehow. The knife he had barely gotten a glimpse of before now shone in his hand, blood crusting on the blade. Was he going to murder them in their beds? Had the magic made him crazy? Tiny suddenly saw his eyes, glowing a fierce green in the night, a faraway look in his eyes, as if he were seeing things that were not there. As he turned away, towards his own room, Tiny saw what had been the purpose for the whole thing. A raised scar, about 6 inches in length, decorated Harry's chest, right over his heart. Blood was still splattered across his front, running down from the scar all the way to his feet. As the snick of a door closing brought him out of his terrified daze, several marks on the floor caught his eye. Bare, bloody footprints. Tiny paled as his strength seemed to leave him, his knees weaker than jelly as he leaned on the wall for support. The extent of the night's horrors were starting to become clear to him. Oh, Harry, what on earth had been done to him? What had he done to himself? Was anything ever going to be normal again? Tiny made a vow to himself, right then and there. He would never doubt Harry again. He might fear him, at times hate him, at times love him, but he would always support him. Harry had given up of himself for all of them, had made a sacrifice. It was the least they could do to return the favor. Harry rested his head against the window, looking out into countryside. He guessed he had been in his room for a few hours at least. It had taken a while to come out of the daze he had been in. The unreal haze of power and knowledge was beginning to fade, replaced by the usual thoughts. He found himself wishing for the freedom of flight, to simply soar and think. He felt confident, though, for the first time since this started. He knew he could do this, and not just do it, but enjoy it. The rush of magic of blood was addictive. He found himself longing almost painfully for the full moon. With a soft sound, his wings come forth unbidden. He was tired, so very tired. He knew he was supposed to meet downstairs, but couldn't bring himself to do so. The wings felt comforting to him as he stared into the darkest night. He shook himself out of the haze he had unknowingly begun to sink back into. Darkest night, that was snake talk. He hoped he didn't start talking like a snake out loud. That would be embarrassing. At that thought, he felt a weary smile come on his face. Definitely had prank material, though. He stood up, stretched, and called his wings back in. It took longer than normal. But once they were in, Harry gratefully collapsed on his bed. Perhaps things would be clearer on the morrow. He would have several things to talk to Mr. Steele about, that was for sure. It was past lunch time. The boys had eaten in mostly silence. Mr. Steele had been informed at breakfast by Tiny that Harry had come in the early hours of the night and went straight to bed. He had also told him the state the boy had been in. With a wince, Mr. Steele had called the boys together to go look in the clearing. Harry's coat was at the edge of the clearing, his shirt thrown to the side, and the box the dagger had rested in was at the edge of the circle. There was a spot in the circle where Harry had obviously knelt, but no footprints of him leaving. Had he jumped out? The boys had tried to ignore the blood on the circle. With a sigh, Mr. Steele himself raked the ground anew, tilling the blood under the soil until it was no longer noticeable. When they had all came in, Mr. Steele had given them the day off. He wasn't sure when Harry would come down, but he was willing to wait. He did not want to rush the boy. By the time lunch rolled around and the boys had eaten and then left again, he was beginning to get worried. He told himself to relax and attempted to sit down at his desk and read. Care poked his head in. Harry is in the shower. I saw him dart in there, and all of his clothes and sheets are in the laundry, sir. They are covered in blood. You think he's okay? Oh, I'm sure he's okay. He's a strong one. I'm sure you will see him at dinner right as rain. Run along now. I doubt he wants to be bothered. What a relief. The boy was okay. Care gave a worried smile and then disappeared again. Mr. Steele steadied himself and then dug back into this research. Harry would join him on his own time. Harry left the shower, feeling much better. Nothing like being clean to give oneself a new perspective. When he woke up, dried blood caked his clothes and mattress. He had quickly darted downstairs, threw his clothes in with the laundry, and jumped into the shower. The box for his dagger had been sitting on the kitchen table, and he reminded himself to grab it and put dread away. He did not like leaving it simply lying out. He couldn't forget Mr. Steele's warning about others touching the ritual knife. Just thinking about dread made his chest ache anew. Though the wound was scarred over, it still felt new. This morning the knife had practically gleamed under the blood. At that thought, Harry grabbed the box and trotted back up the stairs, stopping to grab a wet towel. When he re-entered his room, he carefully picked up the blade and began to wipe it clean. He looked at the tiny knobs on the underside, where his fingers had fit neatly in between. He carefully wiped a speck of blood off of the ruby-red stones and the emerald specks. As he wiped, he remembered first bringing the blade to Mr. Steele and what he had said. "This is very, very good, son. Very good. I've been hoping that you boys would find one someday. These daggers were described in great detail in one of the books I have. A dark, dark book, all about wizarding rituals that use. Well, no matter. See these small knobs around the base of the blade and along the dull end. And this tiny snake here with wings and a mane, defining features of a ritual blade, very distinctive. What a naive fool he had been. The hints had been there all along, and he had had no idea. None of them had. How long had Mr. Steele been keeping such things from them? All the dangerous stuff, the darkness. He stared at his reflection in the blade and traced with one finger the little winged snake embossed at the top of the steel. As if his regard had caught its attention, the wings ruffled slightly and the snake turned its head. He quickly snatched his hand back and breathed a sigh of relief when the symbol stilled. That had been close. He had no desire to talk to Dread, not now. He sighed and figured it was about time to go face the music. He had hid in his room long enough. He set Dread back into its box, slid it under his bed, and then trotted downstairs and to Mr. Steele's room. When he entered the office, the man looked up and smiled. "Harry, so glad to see you up and about. Hungry? I'm afraid you missed breakfast and lunch. Would you like something?" "No, thanks, sir. I did not do the second rune. It didn't feel right." The other man looked disappointed, but hid it quickly. Harry could not help the corresponding pang of disappointment that he felt in response to that. He wanted to think that he was more than someone who happened to be a wizard. Next month, perhaps. Well, actually, I was thinking on the full moon this time, in 15 days. I get this sense that both full and new would be good times. So twice a month I was thinking, or at least most of the time, for this next year, if we have that long anyway. Brilliant, Harry, that is great. Have you any ideas then? Was he not going to ask anything about how the ritual went? Was he waiting for Harry to say something himself? He decided to just play along. Well, obviously Mem will be next. And then I was thinking perhaps Heth, For protection on my left hand, it would fit right in with the scar from the knife. Harry drifted off. Mr. Steele was nodding along, looking politely interested. What did he want? Well, and Zion would be an obvious choice for my right palm. It means weapon. Not too sure about that one, or how to will it to be. He drifted off again. No comments were forthcoming, no ideas. It was as if there was an invisible wall between them now. Harry cleared his throat. Sir, is everything okay? Did I do this right? Is something wrong? Harry hated how he sounded. He hated the desperation creeping into his voice. It was the voice of the boy crying alone in the closet. It was the voice he wished he could discard like one does old clothes or old furniture. Oh no, not at all. I just figured. Well, perhaps you would like to do this on your own. You can always come to me, of course, if you have a problem or question, and of course we will all help you prepare. But perhaps it is better if you do this on your own. I would hate to push my opinion on you. He was worried about that now after everything else. Sir, I value your opinion. Harry insisted. He had been reasonable, he told himself. His questions were reasonable. Oh, I know, and you shall have it, of course. Of course. Well. Harry stood slowly, waiting for a comment but receiving none. Silence crept between them as the unwanted third in their company. He felt strangely empty, like a boat cut adrift without anchor. Well, I guess I'll leave you to your reading. I guess I am hungry after all. I'll just go grab me a snack before dinner. I'll see you tonight. Mr. Steele nodded politely. Harry waited a second longer, enough time for the awkwardness to creep up. Then he finally turned and left the room. Why did he feel as if he had just been abandoned? The look on Harry's face almost changed his mind. The boy had looked so lost. Mr. Steele regained his resolve with a shudder, relieved when the door clicked behind the boy. He was glad Harry was continuing along the path and would finish his set. Of course, the boy did not have much choice. There was a compulsion to finish, once started. The magic desired to be present in sevens, and this was no exception. It would keep Harry focused until the link of 7 runes was complete. He wanted to help, wanted to guide. It would take constant willpower to stay away, but it could not be risked. Harry had to do this alone. If the worst happened and Steele and the rest were captured or done away with, they would have no information on Harry's secret. The other boys did not even know the details, and Mr. Steele himself only knew of the first few runes. He would try to lead Harry away from giving him any details, and hopefully the compulsion would take care of the rest. He did not want to burden Harry more than he already had. What the boy was doing was beyond his years already. Dinner was a quiet affair. The boys were nervous and awkward. Mike and Care had tried to carry a conversation, but it was hard with no one else truly participating. It was universally decided, however, to use funds they had saved up to buy a good telly. That would help with a distraction for sure. Harry trudged up to his bedroom afterwards, laughing off any comments the boys tried to make about the night before. He was fine, perfectly okay, just a little worn around the edges. He sat at his desk, pulling out pen and paper and what he was now referring to as the book. What runes next? Last night the question had seemed so clear. He wished he could get that clarity back. He started to make a list of things he would like. Protection for his mind. Protection for his body. The ability to see hidden things. The ability to attack. He pulled out the little information he had on Aramaic and Sumerian. The cuneiform was harder to comprehend. Once more, he was glad that there were few rules. The more rules, the easier it would be to accidentally break one. At least this way, it was much harder to screw up. Mem was next to protect his mind. That would obviously be on his forehead to take advantage of the scar already present. After that, he was leaning towards Heth on his left palm. Heth was the letter H, and translated to something resembling a fence or barrier. He would make it into a shield of sorts, able to protect from foreign magics, perhaps even give it the ability to extend beyond himself to cover others. After that, he wasn't sure. Zion seemed a shoe-in for an offensive rune, literally meaning weapon. He figured it would work on his right palm, but how would it work? His mind was a bit at a loss on that one. It was also hard to see how it would attack. There were millions of kinds of offensive attacks. He looked over his list again. Okay, the ability to see. More than one rune could work, he supposed. There was Ein, or eye. Also, he window, or even Daleth, door. All could imply seeing things normally hidden from view. He would have to research that one a bit more. Also, where to put it. He wasn't sure he wanted to put another rune on his face. One on his forehead would be bad enough. At least that one wouldn't be much more than what he already had. The tail end would be up near the hairline. Most wouldn't even notice anything different. But putting a rune under his eye, yikes. No, definitely not ready for that yet. Harry rubbed his forehead, feeling a slight headache coming on. He wished Mr. Steele was here. The man always seems to have an idea of what to do. However, instead of the usually sadness, he was beginning to get simply angry. Not angry, furious. A quiet, cold fury at the thought of being abandoned right when he needed guidance the most. He tried to put his focus back on his notes. What body parts besides eyes implied the ability to see? Fingers, ears. No and no. This was impossible. He looked over his notes again. In this picture, Ein was a simple circle, nothing special or fancy. Wait, how small could these runes be? Did they have to be as super big as the ankh on his chest? He absently rubbed his new scar as he flipped pages in his book. Nothing said if size mattered. Only will. He was getting sick of reading that word. Will this, will that, will it, and it happens. Magic and will seem to be a match made in heaven. Harry sighed. Where could he put runes that they are hidden? Under his clothes, obviously. His feet, they are normally in shoes. Palms were not super noticeable either. His hair could hide them too, obviously. Wait, now there was an idea. He could hide some of these runes under his hair. His hair had always grown super fast, once even overnight, and now he knew why that was, didn't he? How far back did the optic nerve go? He struggled to come up with an idea and failed. He would have to get more books, he thought with determination. Perhaps one on anatomy. He tried not to get daunted at the prospect of having to trudge through yet another thick book he could barely situate on his lap. Harry leaned back with another long sigh. He was still tired. He had hoped to sneak out again and go flying, but found himself losing the will. His mind made up, he decided to go to bed early. They still had 4 months before his 10th birthday. He would have no problem getting in the last 6 runes in a set. That was a lot, when he only could come up with 4, maybe 5 he wanted right now. And he was supposed to do this for an entire year. How many runes was that, exactly? 24. He needed more books, more ideas. He wished now he hadn't mentioned to Mr. Steele about doing 2 a month. He had been so certain at the time, but now not so much. But he couldn't go back now. At least the next 2 were pretty straightforward. In the meantime, he would research the others. As he climbed into bed, he considered how the wizards might react. It would be nearly impossible to hide the runes, especially if he had to use any in defense, or if they tried to read his mind. Harry closed his eyes and tried to sleep. That night he dreamed of runes and flying through a starless sky. Underneath it all, a cold fury burned. Tilda, review please. 10. The Butterfly That Lives a Day. Author's note, many thanks to G.J. Mega for editing this. If time and space, as sages say, are things which cannot be, the sun which does not feel decay no greater is than we. So why, love, should we ever pray to live a century? The butterfly that lives a day has lived eternity. T. S. Eliot, he jumped into the research with a fervor never experienced before. He literally could not get enough knowledge, enough practice. Mundane tasks like eating and bathing seemed to be done in a mental haze as his mind again and again went back to runes. He ignored Mr. Steele and seemed to be ignored himself in turn. It no longer worried him. The man had shown up 2 days after the new moon with more books on anatomy, health, and ancient Phoenician cuneiform. He had thanked him and then returned to his study. Nothing seemed more important. The only break he allowed himself to take was to fly. The joy of it had still not worn off. The boys, in the interest of helping Harry out, as well as simply wanting to spend time with him, and isn't he acting strange? Tiny commented, had developed a game of sorts. Care had whittled a simple, large wooden ring. The boys would stand in a circle, Harry hovering above, and randomly toss the ring into the air and to each other, all the while trying to keep it from Harry. Mike had tried to name the game Fetch, but Care had glared him down. Harry personally thought it was funny. The game was fun, and it was helping him learn to fly by leaps and bounds. It also allowed him to spend time with just the boys. He had felt left out since moving to the cottage, and now he was getting back into the normal ease that they used to have. Care was still overprotective, Mike sarcastic and slightly harassing, and Tiny shy and energetic. Harry more and more did not want to leave, but knew it was inevitable. Where he would eventually go, the boys could not follow. He made a promise to himself to spend as much time with them as he could. He had a feeling that Care, and Mike as well to some extent, also recognized the feeling of inevitability. It was finally the day of the full moon. Harry was not as nervous this time, but his heart was still beating fast. He dug into dinner with gusto, laughing along with the others. This time, there was no walk with Mr. Steele. A part of him was sad at that, but another part did not want to waste time with sentiment. His body burned with the desire to continue the runes, an almost physical pain. He reverently held Dread as he walked to the clearing, not bothering with the box. Dread no longer made him nervous, and he had begun to love the feel of it in his hand. He had found himself simply holding it last night, his mind going over and over the rune. Mem, the letter M, what a perfect idea. Too bad he had not come up with it himself. Magic, mind, magnificent. Harry felt himself grinning like a loon. Somewhere inside of himself he wondered if he was going a little bit crazy. The thought dispersed before it could even be considered as he stepped into the clearing. All that mattered now was the ritual. Mem Harry knelt in the clearing, his shoes removed at the edge of the woods. He hissed to Dread, awakening the intelligence inside the knife. Cutting snake, precious snake, my great fear in troubled times. Speaker, it is greatest light. Yes. The hisses reverberated up his hand, the snake staring up into his eyes. He felt himself losing his body, drifting along that invisible line of magic with barely a prompt. His magic was rejoicing inside of him, so happy to be used. He was Dread, the blade connected to him, staring out of two pairs of eyes at a boy's body. He took a moment to view it, consider it, his mind alight with ideas. Mem. The rune seemed to speak for itself, unmade. The blade loomed closer, brushing back a stray lock of hair with a supple twist. It was all so easy. Harry let the blade rest at the bottom of his odd lightning bolt scar. He thought of the wreck he never remembered, and was glad that finally the scar would have a use. A positive inflection. A protection of his mind, his memories, his thoughts. Like water, Mem, like water, too fluid to grasp. Too dispersed in drops to gather up, too much of an ocean to hold. His mind within his magic like water, ever flowing, ever changing its form but staying the same. No wizard could see it, no wizard could touch it. It was not even really there. With that last thought, the cut began. The skin on the forehead was so thin to bleed so much. He was vaguely aware of it running down his face, of the burning pain beginning to spread. The knife zigged and zagged 3 times, following the scar. Mem. At the top, a second pause, then a quick slash over his left eye, at the edge of the hairline and heading into his scalp. It stayed in his skin only a second before the knife abruptly released him, and Harry came to himself. The snakes on the handle caught at his hands, hissing in agitation, and Harry gasped. Mem. When it happened, it was sudden. So sudden it was instantaneous. Harry gasped out the name of the rune, and a memory he had not remembered rose up. The black hole in his skull, the magic drinking circle he had cut off. An alien intelligence grasped at his magic, at his mind, hungry, so hungry. It had been starving there in his head, too weak and too small to fight, but now with its desire so close, and it was wounded, it hurt, it wanted. Harry could barely think fast enough, ideas spinning through his head, fighting and snatching back his magic from the sphere. What was this? It was not part of him. At that thought, Harry felt the rune on his head burn, its magical connection tenuous in its newness. He fought harder, keeping himself from the sphere, moving around it, unwilling to let it touch his self. How to get rid of it? How? It was in his bloody head. He imagined his mind as the water he wanted it to be, and wished so much that the rune was active immediately. He did not have time. The sphere shrieked through him, raging, desperate. A single breath of magic was touched, stolen. I will have you, boy. I will have your being. I will eat your death, boy, I will eat victory. The words echoed through himself, bringing with it fear and pain. He wanted to scream, and did. The sound brought him to himself, and with a final desperate thrust, he gathered his magic and punished the sphere from his mind entirely. He hazily opened his eyes, seeing a black darkness fleeing in the night. He immediately shut them again, falling to lie on his side on the ground. He was tired, so tired. He made himself look at his mind. The residue left behind by the sphere was still there. Strings of a foreign light glittered around his mind. He made himself touch them, bring them to himself. Without considering the repercussions, he made the light a part of himself, soaking it into his own sun. He immediately felt a bit better, the tiniest bit recovered. He was so tired. He cracked an eye open, looked down at Dread, still wrapped around his hand. He should do something about that. Mem. He fell into darkness. Is it ever going to let go? That thing is scary. I can't believe it moves. Well, it's magic, dolt. I know that. The voices brought him back to a hazy weakness. He tried to focus, moved his head the tiniest bit. He's awake. Harry. He tried to focus his eyes, and abruptly could see clearly as someone put his glasses on his face. He stared up at the concerned face of Care before Tiny pushed his way over. Are you okay? You should have seen yourself. You were. Shut it. Mike hisses, interrupting Tiny. Harry figured he already knew what the boy had been about to say. Care smiled and offered Harry some breakfast, which he dug into with gusto. He was starving. You've been asleep most of the day. It's almost super, actually. Mr. Steele is down making it. He told us to watch out for you. Care smiled reassuringly. You don't have to tell us, but is that normal? We all heard you well, the noise you made. It was all we could do to wait for Mr. Steele to let us go out to you. He made us wait until morning just in case, and you were just lying there. He drifted off. Harry swallowed his bite and washed it down with water. He tried to think of a good way to respond. No, that's not normal, or at least not that I know of. Something went wrong. I'm not sure I can explain. It's okay, no problem. Just, we were worried, all of us. The boys all looked earnest at that, and more than just a little worried. He was trying to reassure them when Mr. Steele's voice drifted up from below. Tiny scampered off to tell him Harry was awake, the other boys following after an encouraging nod. Harry closed his eyes. He knew it wouldn't be long. He was right. Mr. Steele slowly walked into the room, lowering himself into the chair by the bed. His kind eyes looked him over before nodding to himself. Something went wrong, sir. I'm not sure, but it seemed as if something was inside me, something that wasn't me, and when I put the rune in, it tried to take me over almost, like it wanted to, eat me, and I'm pretty sure it's gone now, but I don't know for sure. It left behind some of itself, but not the intelligent part, just some sort of magic. Mr. Steele thought for a moment, his brows drawn together. I cannot even begin to counsel you in this matter, Harry. You alone can decide whether it is worth the risk of continuing. This is not a usual occurrence of that, I am sure, based on our studies. Still, you obviously defeated this. Darkness, or whatever it was. Darkness describes it pretty well, I guess. It was like the absence of light. Only it had teeth and grasping claws. I think it even spoke once. It's all kind of fuzzy. He lifted his hands in confusion, only to have something catch his eye. How could he not have noticed dread? Knife was still twined around his hand, the snake staring up into his face. Ah, yes. The knife never released you. We had to be careful moving you to never touch it. I think it was insulting us, actually. Harry could believe it. He started to speak, but stopped, remembering Mr. Steele's reaction last time. The man seemed to follow his thoughts. Ah, yes, well, I'll be hopping down to get some dinner before the boys eat it all. I'll send one up with a plate for you in the morning. Just try to rest, now. You are sure you are all right? Harry simply nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He was afraid he would say something sappy and childish, or he would ask for a hug. Neither of those were appealing options. Mr. Steele left the room with a smile. He turned back to Dread. You are a faithful friend. Harry was shocked that the words sounded almost normal. Master, you had not given us to stillness, and we obey you in all things, all times, all places. He tried not to smile, but couldn't help it. The thing was so fancy and formal. Was the person who made it the same? I have no memory of speaking to you after slicing the softest place on darkest night. Ah! The magic blood life left us, the path having been taken. On brightest light, this was not so. Even still, it courses through us. Harry frowned, and with a bit of concentration brought into his mind the light of his magic. It was much dimmer than normal, burdened with another draw that centered on his forehead. A single strand of light glittered between his chest and the ritual blade. He immediately drew the light back from the blade, letting it coil inside himself once more. When he opened his eyes, Dread was still and silent. He sighed. In a way, it was comforting to talk to the object. He briefly considered finding a real snake to talk to before tossing that idea from his mind. The other boys would have a fit. Things returned to normal as was possible anyway, pretty quickly. The boys made jokes. Mr. Steele looked kind and grave, and Harry studied. Sometimes he flew. Mostly he thought about runes. He had begun to realize that even if he wanted to, he would not be able to stop working on the set. It was a compulsion almost magical in nature. The runes wanted to be complete and wanted to be active. As of now, they were in a sense working, but not to their fullest capacity. Once the seventh was complete, they would all immediately respond. The book described a down period of several days after the initial surge, as it would be very draining on a magical core. Harry would most probably be weak for days. It didn't help that Harry already felt weak, and he was only 2 runes into the set. His mind seemed a bit fuzzy, and he found himself thinking about things in a different way and approaching problems from a different direction. He blamed it on the mind rune. His thoughts came faster, and sometimes it seemed he was drowning in information. 7 runes to a set, and 7 sets to complete the ritual. Not every ancient wizard completed the ritual. Though runes like to exist in a set, the sets did not give a compulsion to exist in 7s. Many stopped at 3 or 4. However, there was a limit of 7. In total, 49 runes. Any more than that, and the magic would get out of sync, and weird outcomes would result. The runes would go awry, and spells would stop working, or worse, start reacting in unexpected and dangerous ways. Harry at this point could not even imagine completing more than 1 set. He felt so drained all the time. He kept telling himself that it had only been 3 weeks now. It felt like a lifetime. His mind circled back around to runes again, like it always did lately. He was getting a more complete picture of what his set was going to be. Of the runes, there would be the 2 types. Those that were constantly active, drawing on magic, and those that were passive, only activating when called. So far both runes were of the active type, as Ankh had to be, and Mem needed to be to protect his mind. His next rune would be the first passive one. Heth. It was the letter H, and could be translated into fence. He would make it into a barrier against foreign magic. He did not want it active all the time, for one, because there were some beneficial magics that he would want to leave himself open to, healing spells, for instance. The rune would be a boundary, a bulwark that he could call on when needed. He would use its name to activate it, Heth, much like a spell. It had so many advantages over a simple spell, though. The magic to create it would already be in place, so it would cost him nothing to implement. It would stay constant until he released it, and it would work against whatever was thrown against it. Harry imagined it something like an invisible bubble, not just surrounding him, but under his feet and over his head as well. That was a necessity, especially if the shield was needed during flight. He did not want to leave any part of himself undefended. He knew he was probably leaving something out. The idea was by no means perfect. He knew that, in time, he would probably find gaps in his defenses. He had read that no plan of action survives contact with the enemy, but this would be a pretty good plan, at least. Harry dived steeply, catching the wooden ring on his outstretched foot. "Cheetah," Tiny crowed. "Oh, you're just sore because he pulled it off with no hands." Tiny grumbled at Mike's comment. The game was getting a bit easy for Harry. Fetch had been fun at first, but after getting used to flight, it was no sweat. "How about this, Skinny? Have you heard of dodgeball?" He landed with a soft thump, shaking his head. "Well, you better get back up there, runt." At that, the wooden ring was thrown straight at him, clunking him over the head. "Oh!" Harry rubbed a bruise on his side, grinning. Dodgeball had indeed been a challenge, especially once Tiny joined in with another wooden ring. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately, neither object had survived contact with his wings. Harry had left them having a heated discussion about what objects could survive contact with the steel feathers. He himself would just need to concentrate on keeping his wings soft while they were playing. He found that it took less effort and simply more concentration, which was something he was running low on. It was only a few days until he would do the next rune. The last week and a half had flown by as he worked, played, and worked some more. The compulsion had only gotten stronger, working into his every waking thought, and even most of his dreams. He felt bombarded. Already he had taken to checking his knife several times a day to make sure it was still there. He had had a nightmare that the knife had disappeared, and he had been unable to complete the rune. He had woken in a cold sweat. Still, things overall were great. He had his family, his magic, and a task. Boredom was a thing of the past. The only dim spot was Mr. Steele himself. He was almost like a spectre of doom, always hovering but never inquiring into his progress. The man said he was content for Harry to figure it out on his own, but he acted differently. Harry just wished he would spit out whatever was bothering him. The man had been like a father to him for the last year and a half. He hated that this magic was creating boundaries between him and the rest of the house. He also hated the anger that seemed to lurk inside of him. Ever since the first rune he had felt it, a rising inadequacy, a jealous, vindictive feeling. At times it seemed aimed at the older man, at times at himself. He did not like being angry, which only made him all the more angry about it. The only respite he could gain was while flying. Something about the exercise brought him out of his dark thoughts and brought him joy and clarity. He shuddered to think what he would deviate into if he lacked that escape. Perhaps he should mention that to Mr. Steele sometime. The magical tattoo had not been mentioned, but its existence was the start of all the changes in their lives. The boys had accepted it and him wholeheartedly. They even seemed to be proud of him. But Mr. Steele was an enigma to Harry. He could not tell how the man felt. Another new moon, 30 days, 1 month since the first rune. It seemed a lifetime ago, and yet no time at all. Harry was excited about this latest rune, as it was the first of his own design. Heth consisted of 2 diagonal cuts, with another diagonal one tying the 2 together. It was simple, as all the others had been as well. It was the one he found the most potential in, as it would be real tangible defense against an enemy. That was also one of the reasons he wanted to go ahead and place it. He would put it on his left palm, using the scar from the ritual knife as one of the diagonal bars. This time, he went flying first. The other boys had seemed even more nervous than ever, though he could not blame them for worrying after the last time. He had had no desire to sit through another awkward meal, and so had skipped out to fly off some of his own nervousness. As excited as he was, what had happened with Mem was the stuff of nightmares. To have another being living inside of him, leeching off his own self. He shuddered. With a turning twist, he allowed himself to drop down into the clearing, landing with a neat puff of dust. He smiled, glorying in his flight. He figured that feeling would never wear off completely, and there was just something about a neat landing that made him extremely happy. Not to mention it was less painful. He rose up his left arm to his face, looking into the glittering eyes of dread. He had awoken the snake earlier, telling it to wrap itself on his arm so that he could fly without having to hold it. The knife had complied immediately, the snake's wrapping around his arm, holding the blade parallel with his wrist. He figured once he got older that might not work as well, but for now it was perfect. "It is darkest night. Release the coil and cut sharp for me." Hisses greeted his ears as dread unwounded itself, the snakes twining into his open palm, the blade once more straight out. He did not wait for conversation this time, as he immediately cast out his magic, connecting to the knife with the most ease he had so far. Heth, he wanted a shield, an impenetrable barrier to protect him. It would be invisible, solid, complete. No gaps, no holes, no dents. Heth, a fence around himself, a barrier between his body and the outside world. Always waiting under his skin for the chance to be released, for the word to set it free. Heth. It would not only block the magic, but sink it into his own, making it a part of his own light, his own constellation. Heth, Heth, Heth. A quick slice of the knife across his old scar on his left palm, another parallel to it. A pause, an indrawn breath, Heth. He drew the blade slowly between the lines this time, reveling in his magic, rising up, seeking out this new thing. He saw the strand of light unfurl, not quite touching, waiting. Heth, a new star shining against the light. He was himself again, dread now in his right hand, jubilant. His magic was again stretched, and he had forgotten how bad it was after a new rune. It was like wearing a constant jacket filled with heavy weights, and even as the body acclimated to one weight, more would slowly be added over time, again and again, the body getting stronger and weaker in its turn. He would recover until another rune was added. The euphoria of the new rune was beginning to wane, bringing with it a deep ache in his chest. He felt like he could sleep for a week. Sleep a deep sleep. I will speak to you when light returns to the sky. Not the best way to say a few days from now. Something was definitely lost in translation. He tried to make a mental note to attempt to teach the blade some real words. Might be hard, though, to explain to a snake what the difference between tomorrow and week and month were. Could snakes even count? At that thought, Harry brought himself to his feet, wobbling a bit before setting off home. He supposed this was better than last time, but he would give his arm to have back the feeling from the first rune, that feeling of overwhelming power and clarity. Perhaps that was just a side effect of Ankh. He rubbed that scar, tracing its outline through his shirt, as he climbed up the stairs and fell into bed. It seemed the ritual was no longer an odd thing. Funny how a person could get used to the strangest things in only a relatively short amount of time. Life simply moved on, and it would all seem a dream if Harry did not have the scars to remind him of it. Harry did not talk to any of the others about his runes or his future plans. Mr. Steele and he only went over wizarding books, ideas, spells, and culture. At least once every few days, the man would bemoan his lack of books on wizarding politics. The boys just practiced their schoolwork, did their chores, and acted the way children were supposed to do. Only, Care was almost an adult. Harry had noticed that he drove to town pretty often and suspected that he had a significant other in Cheddar. None of the others teased him about it, though, so either they did not know or they did not want to bother him about it. Harry, knowing Mike, was leaning towards the former. Harry rested his head against his desk, idly drawing on a piece of paper. He knew what his next to runes would be. Ein or I. It was not technically a letter at all, but more of a symbol, or perhaps a punctuation mark. It consisted of a simple round circle. He had thought long and hard before deciding to do one for each of his eyes. The things just reeked of being singular, and he just had a feeling that to get the effect he wanted, it would take two. He would do one on the full moon, and the other the new moon after. He wanted to be able to see magic. He had read of the hundreds of different ways for wizards to hide themselves. Invisibility cloaks, camouflage spells, notice-me-not spells, blending spells, the list went on. And for each category there were even more types, and counter curses, and a few thousand all-seeing spells. It would be nearly impossible to know them all and protect against them all. However, if he had a rune tied to his eyes to be able to see clearly, that would work. To see the truth of something, that's what he needed. If a wizard was under a cloak or spell, he would see. They would not be able to sneak up on him, at least not in that respect. After studying his anatomy books and reading about the lack of literal meaning in his runic books, he had decided to place the two runes on either side of his head, right before his ears and into his hairline. He would need to shave his head a bit, but it would grow back. He would make them small circles, nothing big, as small as he could cut it. He lifted his head, looking at his palm. Heth looked as if it had been there for years, not just a week. He whispered its name. Heth. He felt the magic tide inside it expand dimly, a ghost of itself. It would not truly work until the set was complete, but still, it was neat to see it respond. He enjoyed the feeling it gave him. As his magic got stronger, he had more energy, and had found that he could connect more light to a rune, making it more powerful. He was not sure if he would ever actively try to improve his runes, but it was an idea to keep in mind. The round moon glowed overhead as Harry tapped the blade against his shin. Mike had gotten a bit too much enjoyment out of shaving the right side of Harry's head, and in his opinion had taken a bit more hair than necessary. He looked like a one-sided clown. He sighed, waiting a few more seconds. It was as if an internal clock dictated the right time to start. The clearing was never totally silent at night. Owls hooted, bats chittered, and bugs creaked and crooned and clacked. He could just listen to it for hours, never hearing the exact same sound. A vast array of communication that he could never hope to understand. He looked down at Dread, a wordless hiss lilting from his mouth. The snakes' hooded heads rose up, looking into his eyes. He found communication to be less and less necessary, but more and more comforting. He knew the item was just that, an object, but at times it was almost like a friend. Perhaps it was simply that the more he used the knife, the more it became attuned to his magic. The blade glowed to his sight now, and more the snakes seemed alive, from the way they moved to the gleam on their tricolor scales. The inset stones seemed more like hardened skin, the eyes lit from within by an intelligent flame. Speaker, you lack flight. Oh, yes. Harry closed his eyes and allowed his wings to slide forth, sighing in relief. Holding them in too long would cause the ever-present itch to get more and more urgent, eventually resulting in a burning sensation alike to sticking a limb into a fire. He never let it go that far, always stretching them out in his room or flying off at night. He had not been able to get out the last few days, and it was nice to let them simply furl around him. The silver on the feathers gleamed slightly, the moon reflected back dimly. Giving great fear in troubled times, come and taste the night air. It is greatest light. Harry had come to accept the fact that snakes did not consider smell to be something done with a nose, but instead a thing to be tasted. It was odd how his mouth seemed to know these things when it spoke, but it took his mind a few minutes to figure it out. A snake's point of view was much different than his own. Dread coiled in his arm, then his mind, the light there before he even consciously willed it. He allowed himself to slide behind Dread's eyes, to think like the snakes, feel like the snakes. He was polycephaly, seeing from four eyes with two minds. He raised the blade in his coils, elongated his body, twisting the fragile wrist beneath his scales to lift the blade towards the right side of the head. Ein, the I, the silent letter of the alphabet, never spoken, only implied, would let him see clearly, see beyond the outer illusions into the inner truth. He placed the blade against the side of his face, gently tracing a circle, round and round, not cutting yet just thinking. Ein sees but does not speak. The truth of things, reflected through a glass, clearly. Ein. Ein. Even as he spoke the word with lips that were not his own, the blade carved within his grasp a circle, a square with infinite corners and possibilities, a tiny scar just within the hairline. Barely a drop of blood darted the knife. He opened his true eyes, letting dread slide from his mind. Everything was thrown out of focus, and for a minute he reeled before closing his eyes again. What on earth? He cracked open his eyes, taking a moment. He reached up to his glasses before rubbing his right eye. It was strangely fuzzy, as if he had sleep stuck in it. He squinted before standing up with a confused sign. Even as he tried to take a step, he shifted his weight wrong, the ground farther away than he thought, and he stumbled and fell to the ground. Ah! He pulled off his glasses with a frustrated grunt, only to have the problem reverse itself immediately. Suddenly the truth knocked him over the head, and he could have slapped himself for not considering this outcome. Only one eye, his right, was affected by the ritual. Now his prescription was thrown off. The right eye was not just seeing magic clearly, but everything clearly. Somehow, without intending to, he had just managed to correct his own eyesight. The possibility jumped into him, his mind alight with ideas. Marvelous. He found himself laughing, dread still and quiet in his hand. This was amazing, or maybe not so amazing. Harry groaned as he threw himself down into a chair at breakfast. He had already tripped on the stairs, ran into 50 million small obstacles, fell out of bed, cut himself on a steak knife, and he was pretty sure he had a broken toe. The boys had not stopped laughing since the day before, when the whole episode had kicked off to a loud start, literally. Harry had attempted to help Tiny collect eggs, only to stick his hand under the rooster instead. Needless to say, nobody had been happy with that situation, least of all the rooster. He was amazed how much his balance was thrown off, and flying was totally out of the question for the next 2 weeks, until he could cut in the rune for his left eye. He had left his glasses upstairs, preferring to use his new and improved right eye. He had taken to walking around the house with his hand covering his left eye, trying to keep things in focus. Reading was a horrible chore, as his good eye quickly began to feel strained. Care and the boys stomped downstairs, laughing and joking at something Mike had in his hands. When the boy fixed a smirk on Harry, he felt his stomach drop. What on earth now? Mike sauntered over, his grin widened into a full-out evil smile. He then walked behind Harry and quickly slipped a piece of cloth over his left eye and tied it behind his head. Care and Tiny about died laughing, and Mike was trying to take a picture. I see we have a pirate in our midst. Mr. Steele smiled tolerantly, eyeing the cloth. Harry felt his face begin to burn red before he too gave in and laughed. Now he knew what they were up to. He stood up and eyed himself in the mirror. It did look just like an eye patch, which was funny in more than one way. He could appreciate the humor, especially since most of his lower body was turning black and blue from running into things. Well, at least he wouldn't have to hold his hand up anymore. He would keep wearing it, if only to spite Mike, who he thought had expected him to get angry. He laughed again at the perturbed look on Mike's face. At the beginning of April, a week before the next new moon, Harry came to an abrupt realization. He was more than halfway done with this set of runes. Ankh, Mem, Heth, Ayin. 4 of 7 done, only 3 more to go. Another Ayin, obviously. Then it would be time for Zayin, weapon. That one was going to be tricky. After that, for the final 7th rune, Harry was still uncertain. He wanted to do something to improve his actual body. After seeing how iron had improved his eyesight, he found himself wanting other things as well. He already had a rune for defense, and he was planning a rune for offense. What was something many wizards did not focus on? Their physical shape. They had spells for so many things, and relied on their magic for both defense and offense. If a wizard was deprived of their wand, they were helpless. Harry never wanted to be in that situation. He was thinking of something to do with strength or speed, or maybe even just improving his reflexes or response time. His memory could always be better, though he was still getting over how Mem had changed his thought process. Suddenly it seemed Harry had a million different ideas and could only pick a single one. It was beyond frustrating. And to pick the wrong one would be a mistake he would have to live with for a lifetime. He shook his head and told himself to simply concentrate on the next two. They had a way of working themselves out. He lifted dread from its barks, running his finger over the winged snake on the blade. He had looked it up in one of the wizarding books on magical beasts. A Quetzalcoatl was a South American magical snake, not native to Europe. It confused Harry to see a creature such as that carved into a blade that seemed very British. The snake could only survive in warm, humid environments. It was revered by the Mayans, and still had its own religion today by muggles in Mexico. It had feathers instead of scales, and great wings that would carry it into the trees to escape danger and seek out prey. They normally hunted alone, but would live in nests with other members of their species. He wondered why the winged snake would be carved into the blade, but the snakes that consisted of the handle were the more well-known cobra. He figured it had something to do with the magic of the ritual blade. Nothing he read had had any information on that. The section of the book on ritual knives had not been clear. It said that a ritual knife could have any animal represented on it, only that it be a mundane and not magical animal of itself, which explained the cobras and not some magical breed like runespur or basilisk. But why the picture of a Quetzalcoatl? He shook his head and put the knife back down. The thing was about a foot long total, the blade portion only 5 inches. He had found himself more and more often wanting to carry the thing around with him, the worry of losing it making him more and more paranoid. He made himself close the lid, stand up, and walk away. He needed to eat, take a nice long shower, and sleep. Only a week, and he could finally put away this goofy eye patch. He found himself smiling at the thought. Once more he was in the clearing, this time with the sky dark as pitch. It was overcast and dreary, and not a single star peeked through the clouds. He was shivering cold and wore an extra coat. This was just the sort of awful weather to start out what was supposed to be a springy May. He grumbled to himself before reluctantly pulling off the glove on his left hand, awakening dread with a quick hiss. Evil weather for hatchlings. The snakes commented to themselves. As if summoned, a droplet of rain plunked nearby. It was the signal for a downpour to start. Harry almost howled in annoyance. This sucked. Didn't the magical gods that be, or whatever, know an important ritual was going on down here? Ugh! He flung magic towards the knife, aggressively pouring himself into it. He was going to get this over with as quickly as possible. He was already soaked straight through. He tried to get his mind into the right place. Iron. Left eye to see clearly as a brother to the right eye to be equals in sight, to see through illusion, to see magic, to see truth. He let the magic guide him to his left temple and with finesse carved a quick circle. He did not pause to enjoy the magic this time. He snapped out the rune. Iron. He then left the knife with a quick hiss of farewell. And warm heat, please, next light. Dread got in the last parting comment before the snakes froze in inaction once more. He grunted, ripping off the eye patch and standing up with a stagger. His wings were heavy. Soaked through with rain, they felt like they weighed a ton. He brought them in, and rain poured into the slits in the back of the jacket. He groaned in frustration before giving it up and jogging quickly back to the house. He would enjoy his better eyesight later when it wasn't so bloody horrible outside. Coo. Harry blearily gazed over at Care. Mike and Tiny had written him off as contagious, which left Care to bring him up some lunch. Harry fell back on his bed with a groan. I hate being sick. I hate it, hate it, hate it. Harry could not even enjoy his lack of glasses. He ached all over, had a horrible taste in his mouth, and was pretty sure he was running a fever. All because of that stupid rain. Don't be too hard on yourself, Harry. Even super awesome magical people get colds, apparently. Ha ha ha. Harry quipped back at Care's comment, in no mood for humor. If he never got sick again, it would be too soon. The completion of the second rune Ein had made things much better in the sight department, once Harry felt like getting up and moving around again. He left his glasses in the drawer, reveling in being able to walk around without them. He could see out of the corners of his eyes now, not just straight ahead like before when he was looking through thick glass. He still ran into things. It took some getting used to, but it was much, much better. He really couldn't see how Iron would improve once the set was complete. He already had perfect vision. The cold had had a lasting impression, though. He did not want to go through that hell again. It had been years since he had been that sick. It had taken a good week to get over it, and now he only had a week to prepare for Rune 6. He had changed his mind, however. He was going to leave Zion for last, because he had just had a shift in priorities. Namely, never getting sick again. It had only taken a bit of thought to come up with his sixth rune in light of recent events. Samek, or support, it was a single vertical line, crossed with three horizontal ones. He would manipulate its meaning to be a literally support on his body, a magical line to help heal and strengthen his body, to allow him to escape from worse conditions and recover faster if he succumbed to sickness. It would take more than one rune, he figured, to actually heal a variety of injuries and illnesses, but he could speed things up at least, make them more efficient. And magic was definitely good for getting things done faster. He could tell that by the variety of wizarding spells out there. The rune would channel magic into his system, allowing it to boost his health, making him heal faster, last longer, get less tired. A match made in heaven, as far as he was concerned. He flew over the gorge, his eyes drinking in the magnificent sign below him. More and more often his nighttime flights took him over the space, its variety of plants and rocks always seeming new. He sometimes even flew low, low enough to appreciate the height of the gorge walls and the depths of the caverns. He loved to try and spot animals, a sleeping deer here and flying owl there. He watched and appreciated. He dreamed of visiting places like this all over the world, of flying over the ocean, seeing huge lakes and waterfalls, exploring mountain ranges and valleys. He wanted to see and see and see until his eyes got tired of seeing. And he wanted to do it during the daytime. He loved the night, loved the way the light reflected softly over the trees, but he sometimes wanted to see things during the day when things were brighter. He wanted to fly through a blue sky, wanted to see his shadow on the ground. He knew that that was not possible yet, and perhaps never. Not unless he could find some way to make himself invisible, which was a feat he had not figured out yet. At least, not one that would hide his wings as well. The thing seemed impervious to magic, both good and bad. Seeing wings with nothing attached flying around would probably freak some people out. He let an updraft bring him higher in the sky, almost touching a low cloud. He did not allow himself to actually enter it, having found that clouds and himself did not make a good combination. It might sound fancy and cool to fly through a cloud, but the reality was cold, wet, and blind. After one time, he had had enough. He did not fly on heavily overcast nights, and he did not fly through clouds. Harry turned his wings toward home, beginning to feel tired. Flying was a strenuous exercise, and one he thoroughly enjoyed, but it left him tired at the end of the night. Or perhaps the beginning of the morning would be more accurate. His thoughts had hovered lately at the knowledge that soon his set would be complete. And then, 3 months from now, he would be turning 10. He did not know, none of them did, whether the wizards would come for him then or not. He did not feel even a little prepared. He would only have 2 months to practice his runes before his actual birthday. Anything could happen. He knew Mr. Steele doubted it was the 10th birthday, more like 11th or 12th, but it did not hurt to be prepared. The only things Harry could focus on were the runes and his birthday. Everything else had left his mind. The compulsion to finish the runic set was almost painful, and his magic felt stretched out and thin. In all honesty, he was beginning to wonder how he was even functioning. The others had to remind him to eat, and all games had stopped. Harry simply could not concentrate. He landed in the yard, stretching his wings and back a few times before drawing them in and entering the house, quietly tiptoeing up the steps and into his rooms. He figured by now the others knew he was sneaking out, and either did not care or did not think it was worth talking about. Probably both. He opened the box on his desk again, taking out Dread and holding it close. He always wanted it near him now, paranoid almost to the point of violence over the thought of it disappearing. He knew, dimly, that it had to be some sort of magic making him feel this way, but he could not argue or fight with it any more. When he fell asleep that night, the snakes were curled tight around his forearm, the blade resting against his skin. The day of the full moon came around 2 days later. The knife had not left his arm since, and Harry had barely left his room. I coaxed him down to breakfast, but Harry could barely eat. The other boys exchanged worried glances, but Mr. Steele held them off. The man had some idea of what was going on and knew there was no help they could give him. All they could do was keep him healthy until the ritual was finished. The 6th rune tonight, and then 2 weeks from now, it was over. Then they could really start putting together a base plan for the end of July. Hopefully Harry would recover quickly, for time was of the essence now. Throughout the day, the boys took turns trying to keep Harry company, but eventually left him sitting at his desk, looking out his window towards the ritual circle. His thoughts went around, and in a haze time passed swiftly. Before he knew it, the sun was setting behind the trees, and the moon was rising in the sky. Stars began to glitter, blue fading to purple, turning to black. It was a beautiful sight, a beautiful sunset. He stood resolutely, passing through the house like a ghost, heading out into the early night. He did not acknowledge the questioning tone of voice, his only thought on the moon. The greatest light, the hour of becoming. Dread was hissing on his wrist, and when had it come alive anyway? He shed his shoes, his coat, his emotion. He had spent many hours thinking of where to put the rune. Healing always seemed centered in the body, something that needed balance and control. He had found it funny that Samek, when combined with Mem, translated into Angel of Death. It seemed, then, only fair to write Samek into the middle of his skull, above and near to Mem. He had not asked the boys to shave his head this time. Instead, standing outside the circle, he lifted Dread and drew it across his forehead, shearing the hair short and uneven. The blade cut hair as easily as it did skin. He then drew it close across the skin, leaving nothing but fine stubble in its place. He did not care about how he looked. The magic had him deep in its grasp, the rune on his chest aching fiercely. Ankh, Memheth, Ayn, all of them burning. He fell to his knees in the center, tears welling behind his eyes. When he reopened his eyes, he was looking himself over, swaying back and forth, a snake charming its prey to stillness. The blade was a part of him, his flesh and blood and steel, sharp as the feathers on his other self's back, deadly. He could feel the moon above him, a looming presence boosting his magic, pulling and pushing and twisting it into the desired form. In that moment, he loved the moon as he loved the night sky, and the stars, and the mother he could only remember in his nightmares as a single high scream. The knife was swift, falling down like the dew, soft and inevitable. Its touch curled back the skin, parted and let the blood magic life through, let it into the light of the mother moon scream. One stroke down for his body self-magic, 3 across for healing and strength and health. Samek to support, to uphold, to lean upon. It would be hidden and always present, always active, always carrying forth its purpose. Samek. Light flooded the rune, sealing its purpose, sealing the skin into its shape. He gloried in it, in the light of the moon on his upturned face, in the light flooding from his soul. He was almost complete. He was strong and confident and ready. And then the fall. *** review please. ***. 11. Fire or Fire. Author's note. Many thanks to GJ Mega for editing this, who then devised the torment. Love. Love is the unfamiliar name behind the hands that wove the intolerable shirt of flame which human power cannot remove. We only live, only suspire consumed by either fire or fire. T.S. Eliot, perhaps the fall would not have been so bad if the height had not been so great. The rush of magic filling every pore of his being, the runes burning painful pleasure across his skin. It was euphoria, a sensation hard to describe and harder to place. For a glorious second he was his magic, was a being made of light. Then it was if a star had fallen, a missing link in his self-discovery, and the runes had rebelled, had fought, had attacked him in their discontent. His own magic turned against him, rending and tearing, an angry snake squeezing him in its coils. A punishment and a threat, the consequences of having an incomplete set. He had had the impression beaten in him that his magic was not his own until the runes were satisfied, the balance of magic weighed and measured. Mean, tekel, eupharsin, to measure, to weigh, to divide. A phrase in Aramaic he had read before, the writing on the wall. He had been measured and weighed and found lacking. Harry sighed, gathering in a lungful of air and letting it go slowly, closing his eyes. He was so bloody tired. When the magic had finally let him go, he had only rested on his hands and knees, laying his sweaty head against his arms. His wings were gone, no magic left to even summon them. Dread was even silent, banished from his magic. He had no energy to move. He had waited there for hours, unable to rest, unable to move. When the air began to lighten, he painfully sat upright, feeling stiff and sore. Voices began to move closer through the woods, coming from the direction of the house. He looked up at the sky, light pinks and yellows and purples pushing back the darkness. Harry, oh Harry, are you okay? Can you walk? Harry, Harry. The voice, young and urgent, beckoned to him. He made himself look, turning his head inch by painful inch. He met eyes, uncomprehending. Everything seemed bright and fragile. Hands grasped him, lifting him up, steadying him. More voices conferred back and forth, worried and frustrated, and Harry just stared, unblinking, silent. Finally, strong arms lifted him, gathering him close as a voice let loose a stream of curses. He was carried through the wood into the house, laid in bed. He was gently pressed back into the pillows, soothing sounds running together in his mind. He could not understand the words, only that someone was there, someone who loved him, someone who wanted him to be all right. Harry, my son, talk to me. Are you all right? More voices, more hands, food brought and taken away. Still, he could not rest, his mind frozen in shock, his magic dribbling in slowly, a drop at a time, and he was angry and hurt, and he just wanted to go to sleep and wake up and have everything make sense again. Darkness began to creep into the room, shadows growing longer and larger and swallowing the light as it consumed the day. Harry closed his mind with his eyes, letting the darkness swallow him too. When Harry awoke, the sun was streaming in through the window, lighting up small sparkles of dust that were floating in the air. For a second, he just watched them dance, letting his mind rest and drift. He was on his bed, the covers pulled up over his chest. Slowly, he lifted his right hand, feeling an extra weight attached to his forearm. Sun glinted off the polished scales of the red-eyed cobra. He spent a moment considering the two-headed snake, the green and red that twined together. Dread was silent and still, no magic connecting the two of them. He lifted his hand the rest of the way, finally softly touching the hair on his head. He spent a minute considering, his mind unable to comprehend. His hair was as long and messy as usual. He pressed his fingers harder against his scalp, feeling the raised skin underneath the hair. Semek, he remembered. Harry slowly lumbered down the stairs, taking one step at a time. His body felt fragile, sensitive. He was hyper-aware of every bruise and cut and scar on his skin. Never before had he understood the dangers of blood magic as he did in that single moment. His magic, too, was scarred and refused to respond to his call. His wings were just a tattoo on the skin, pretty and elegant and useless. He followed the hushed voices coming from the other room, greeted with silence as he entered the kitchen. For a second they all paused, shocked to see him. Then, as a wave would break on the shore, they all started forward at once, bombarding him with questions and queries about his health, his mind, his feelings. Harry found it hard to separate one voice from another, one word and thought from any of them. He began to shake, and an authoritative hand pushed him into a chair, and silence reigned once more. When Harry looked up again, only Mr. Steele and Care remained in the room. Care stood, arms crossed, on the opposite side of him from Steele. The boy practically radiated a mixture of anger and concern. Mr. Steele's calm facade was broken, betraying a depth of worry the man had never shown before. Harry, this ritual, this magic, it is too much. I have seen sense, have been shown sense. The man glanced at Care, who glared right back. He continued, I do not know what happened, but too much has went wrong already. Too much unplanned consequences. We cannot do this again. You should not have to go through this again. We'll find another way. We will come up with something. Care interrupted forcefully, his eyes earnest. Harry, please listen. I know this, whatever this is supposed to protect you and us, and whatever from the wizards who may or may not be enemies, but please, the boys and I, we have been training too. We can protect you, I know we can. And we can protect ourselves too. These wizards, they don't seem to think much of us. They underestimate us. We can help ourselves. You do not have to do this anymore. It's not worth it. You could die. Harry blinked, feeling a bit in shock. The truth washed over him and he accepted it. He could die. He could, but nothing in this world would stop him from cutting that last rune into his skin. He started to talk, coughed, and had to clear his throat and start again. Another glass of water was pushing into his hands. I know. I realized this last night at some point. Nothing went wrong this time, I don't think. It's the magic. It's its own rules, its own desires of a sort. To break those rules is a fate worse than death. Last night or whenever. It's been 2 days, Care blurted out. Harry gulped and nodded. Well, 2 nights ago that was like a warning. The runes, I've done 6 so far. And 7, well, that's the magic number, so to speak. My magic, it's, well, perhaps not gone, but inaccessible. I cannot feel anything. Until that 7th rune is complete, I don't think I will be able to go on. I will not be able to go on. I have to, don't you see? I have to complete it. I have no choice. Care looked angry, helpless. The boy, well, man now he supposed, could not argue with him. Mr. Steele nodded. It is as I feared then. Well, once this runic set is complete, we will have more of an idea of what is going to happen if there is a next time. There will not be a next time, sir. Don't you see? How on earth could you allow Harry to go through all this again? What is the purpose? Care, I understand how you feel. I do not like it either, but Harry is already protected in ways we could never protect him ourselves. And if he goes into the wizarding world on his own, he will have defenses that others will not expect of him. If we want to be able to see him again, to keep in contact with him, this is the only way. Care shook his head violently before launching into another tirade. Harry did not bother listening, even if he was appreciative of the other boy caring about him. Mr. Steele understood just as Harry did. Anything that he would have over the wizards was an advantage. None of them knew for certain what was going to happen. Harry would be their eyes and ears into that world. He would be able to tell them about its structure, its population, its heights and depths. Harry had caught on to the fact that there must be other normal people in this scheme with Mr. Steele. The man had made vague comments about others, and he also somehow was still coming up with new material, even out here. And some of their own books would mysteriously disappear as well, usually after one of the many trips into town. Mr. Steele must be part of a network of people trying to figure out this secret world. Harry wanted to know their motives as well, and eventually would insist on it. Money, weapons, defense. Who knew? Harry leaned back in his chair. 2 weeks could not pass fast enough. He wanted his magic back, and he wanted to get on with his life. He wasn't sure about any more sets of runes, but it would be him that would make that decision, no one else. And if the wizards came in 2 months, he would be ready for them as well. Perhaps not as ready as he would like, but more ready than he would be if he had known nothing of the wizarding world. He looked up at the inquiring tone of voice. Care repeated himself with a frown. I asked, are you hungry? You've got to be. He nodded thankfully. As the boy turned and walked over to the fridge, Harry saw that Mr. Steele had quietly disappeared. It took another 3 days before Harry could focus on anything that mattered. Still, things were much harder. He felt like only half a person. He did not dare try to talk with Dread, who was still wrapped tight around his forearm. Instead, he planned Zion and attempted to catch the others in their own plans. Care, Mike, and Tiny would all spend the morning together. He suspected it was target practice. Then in the afternoon, they would closet themselves in with Mr. Steele. Eventually, he simply asked the older man what they were up to. Plans, of course, for how we might defend this property, where we will go, and how, if we need to flee. We will go over all this with you too, of course, once you have less on your mind. We all must be in this together. Harry had to make do with that. No other information was forthcoming. A week until the new moon, the same as when this all first began. Harry sat at his desk. He missed flying so much. It had helped ease his mind and body. Now, with no escape, all he had to grasp was the last rune. Zion, the letter Z weapon. It even looked like a Z, though perhaps one set on an angle. It would be carved on his right palm, the mirror to Heth. He had always been dominant in his right hand, and he figured that would also be his wand hand. That seems to make all the more sense to put an offense rune there. Zion, the 7th letter in the Aramaic alphabet, and the 7th rune on his skin. It could even mean the number 7 in some contexts. A magic rune, if he had ever seen one. It was all so poetic. He obsessed over Zion, learning all its connotations and root words. The rune was almost paradoxical, for it was derived of the word for rest. What weapons and rest seemed to have in common eluded him at first, until he considered his own situation. Sometimes a weapon of war was needed to accomplish rest, to be able to have peace. Zion would not be a tool of revenge or evil, but a weapon to defend, a tool of righteous anger, of justice, to correct wrongs, to even the balance. How odd it was that the number 7 was revered even outside of magic. In the Hebrew language, which often used evolved forms of Aramaic and Phoenician, the number 7 was the number of wholeness, of completion, of being blessed. He too would be blessed once the 7th rune was completed. His set would be complete, his magic complete, and he would be blessed with their magic, their power. His body thrummed with the thought, a ragged pulse running through his body. Zion, 7th weapon, over and over. Zion, 7th weapon. When he woke up the morning of the new moon, his magic was alive. It swirled like a conscious beast through the air, sniffing and snarling and purring and growling. It romped and reveled and made him laugh aloud with joy. He could not call it back into himself, even if he wanted to. When he came down the stairs, the boys stared transfixed. His magic showered sparks of light, tiny specks of green and purple and blue and red, every color of the rainbow. The air glittered. Tiny was the first to laugh, and then they all joined in. Mike was awed and reached out a hand to touch. The magic changed, caressed, loved. The boy's face showed the most emotion Harry had ever seen, heartbroken and joyful all at once. "Thank you, Harry." His voice shook, and then he turned and left the room. Care and Tiny stared before reaching out their hands in turn. Some of the same must have happened to them as well, because Tiny sat immediately, while Care turned several shades of red. "It's like, wow, like I know how you feel. We are family." The word love did not have to be said. Tiny hugged him, the magic singing in the air. The morning hours went by fast, his magic growing more and more bold. At lunchtime, his wings released on their own, and the relief almost brought Harry to his knees. The burning he had been dealing with abruptly disappeared, and his magic rained down on him like a cool summer storm. His wings were sharp, then soft, turning back and forth faster than the eye could see. Mr. Steele suggested they move the party outside before damage was done. Harry's magic grew more and more solid, at times a bird in the air, other times a cat crouched in the grass, always moving and exploring. They all watched it, in wonder. Harry told them he could not control it, and that while he knew the magic was happy at the nearness of the culmination to the ritual, he also knew that that happiness would quickly turn to rage if the set was not complete. What a physical magical presence would do if it was denied was not something Harry had to guess at. He imagined he would not walk away from the result unscathed. Dinner time came and went, a hasty picnic outside as the sky began to darken. Harry smiled and talked about nonsense, enjoying the presence of the others. When the magic began to get increasingly frantic, he stood and turned his face towards the clearing, a tug almost physically tugging at his feet. "Good luck, Harry. We will be waiting." Mike spoke up, his voice calm. He said it as a statement, with no doubt that Harry would return. He smiled before turning almost against his will and stepping away. With each step, his magic grew closer, began to coalesce back inside himself. It prowled at his heels, and when he stepped into the clearing, it let out an unearthly howl to a new moon, to the darkest night. It was then a part of him, and Harry felt as if his feet were barely touching the ground as he walked into the circle. He could not bring himself to sit, but stood, wings spread out behind him. He lifted his forearm to his eyes, looking dread over in the darkness. The dagger had stayed around his arm the whole time, unable to be removed. Perhaps it was even a side effect of the ritual coming to completion. Awaken, blade of mine, to the hour before it all ends. At his hiss the scales shifted, the heads began to sway, steel tongues flicking out to taste the air. Red and green flashed, and the blade lifted from where it had rested against his skin. He felt its loss and reveled in it. "We wait, winged speaker. We wait on your magic light, to taste the magic blood life, to tear the softest place, to create anew the balance of darkest night and greatest light." Harry found himself smiling wildly, relieved to hear their odd speech and ritualistic words. He looked within himself, saw his light arching across his body in patterns he could not understand. For how long he stood there, he could not say, just skimming along the magic and feeling its power. His runes began to burn again, their light increasing by the minute as magic streamed to them. His heart beat heavily, struggling with the load. Harry opened his eyes, knowing the light glowed from behind them. It was almost time. At once he seemed to be looking out, and again looking him over, and now it was three pairs of eyes that saw, three heads that thought, and his coils tightened, and his hands clenched, and his scales shifted, and his wings spread, and he was a creature of light. He was his own sun shining. Ankh. At the word his heart thumped heavily, and his breath left his body. Mem. Again, a stutter, a heartbeat. Heth. It was burning his skin and his lungs and his magic. Ein. Another stutter, another thump, and he felt as if his heart would beat out of his chest, would drum into the ground. Ein. Another for the other, brothers in runes, at once one rune and two. If he had still had his vision, he would have lost it then, as sparks gathered together, and darkness bled through his body as his lungs struggled to breathe. Samek. Oh, the power, the sixth rune, the catalyst, the point of no return. He felt a scream building within himself and forced it down with pure will. His eyes turned to his right palm, held open before him like a sacrifice. Giving great fear in troubled times shifted, hisses spilling forth, steel moving and grinding against itself, the point of the blade resting against the softest place. The number 7, the greatest number of all. The numerical value all magic desired to be present in, the weight and balance of the world. For a weapon in defense of peace, his own and those he loved, to bring rest, to bring justice. A weapon whose form was morphed, ever changing to meet the need, but always there, always sharp, always waiting. Weapon 7. A quick slash, down and over and up across and down again, as neat as writing with a pen, the ink blood that spilled up and over, running down the wrist and the arm and dripping from the elbow, liquid power given to the earth. Zion. 7 runes, 7 magics, 7 spells, 7 scars, 7 times blood spilt in this place, 7 times magic and life given to the moon and the air and the ground. His magic rumbled, it howled, it sang, exultation at its highest point, the culmination of all the struggle. He was aware of dread wrapping itself back around his forearm, of the pain of its fangs sinking into his wrist, the sharing of life and power. The runes across his body no longer burned, they seared, open again, and then closed, a reiteration of the last 3.5 months. 7 nights, 4 with a dark moon and 3 with light. The light within him leaped, and he leapt with it, spinning into the air in a glory of flight, his heart beating in time with his wings. His eyes beheld at once far and near, a magic of its own, and everything seemed created anew and ancient at the same time. He was a new creature from an ancient world, the only of his kind. He flew until dawn began to lighten the sky, his own strength dwindling as it grew stronger. He landed in the yard with a running bound, each step weighted more than the other as he approached the door. He carried himself of his own power up the stairs, past the others anxiously waiting for him, into his room, closing the door with a quiet snick. He breathed in and out, letting his heartbeat slow, letting his magic slide from his grasp at last. He felt free for the first time in months, his thoughts truly his own at last. The compulsion from the ritual was gone, and in its place clarity. He slid off his clothes and sat on the bed, looking down at dread looped around his arm. The cobra's fangs were buried in his wrist, and it was beginning to ache fiercely. The eye gleamed up at him, and he realized that the thing was not even dormant. Release me. The hiss spilled from his mouth, and the dagger immediately complied, lifting its heads up with a bit of a sulk. The 4 puncture holes sealed instantly, and he saw they were the exact same as the ones he had before, when the knife was first banded to him. He shook his head. How was he supposed to tell the snake that he might never call it again? Or if he did, it would be months and months from now. Perhaps likening it to the seasons, winter and summer, would help. Did it even matter? Sleep for me, sleep the deep sleep of coldest light and soft snow. It will be warm again before I need you. As the motion stilled and the magic left the knife, Harry put it in its chest for the first time in over a month. He no longer felt that constant need to have it by his side. He slid the chest under the bed with a final caress before falling back on his bed. He was tired, but it was the clean kind that came about from being up all night, not the bone-deep weariness he had walked around in lately. He slept. The soft knock at his door woke him up. He came awake instantly from a dreamless sleep. Strength filled him as he easily swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood up. It was dark outside, and he assumed it must be about dinner time. The smells wafting from outside the door confirmed his theory. Harry! a soft voice, afraid to wake. He smiled and opened the door about causing Tiny to fall flat on his face. The boy hopped back with wide eyes, gaping. Harry, you're awake. We thought you might like food, but we didn't want to disturb you, and you've been so tired and weak, and I thought, well, you would be too tired, but they said to offer food, and... Harry laughed and stopped the flood of words with a gesture. I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I'm starving. The boy grinned and led the way downstairs, greeted with shouts of surprise. Harry, Harry, you are awake. The boys practically jumped him, talking quickly and asking questions. Mr. Steele saved him when he entered the room, a quiet, calm presence. Let him eat, boys. He can tell us all about it at the dinner table. Dinner was a loud and happy affair. The mood lightened greatly. Harry tried to explain as best he could the details, but most of it was incomprehensible. How to explain magic as light, runes as constellations, his body as a living sky. It would make no sense without showing it, and how could they understand, being magicless? Would it only make them regret what they had never had? Well, at least that creepy knife is gone. I swear that thing wanted to bite us or something. Oh, come on, it just wanted to be friendly, Mike teased Tiny, who rolled his eyes dramatically. Harry was suddenly struck anew by how much he would miss them when he had to leave, and the fervent hope that he would have another year with them. Dinner was finished, dishes cleaned, and everyone went their separate ways. Harry found himself hovering in the door of Mr. Steele's office, watching the man at his desk. He had a computer now, a slim, compact thing, and was steadily typing away. The man looked up and gestured Harry to a seat. He closed the door behind him. For a second he sat there in silence, putting his thoughts in order. Sir, I feel much better now that the set is complete. My mind is clear for the first time since beginning. I know why we did what we did, and now my mind is protected. No one can take information from me without my consent, and even then it might be difficult. My magic is stronger, my body is stronger. Against my peers, I will have significant advantage. What is our next goal, truly? I'm not sure I know what you mean. Harry watched him a second before looking down at the desk, suddenly nervous. I know there must be more. More people in on this, whatever this is. All the evidence points to you not working on your own. You don't have to tell me. Said the last quickly as Mr. Steele began to interrupt before continuing. I figured this whole thing with me, so you can find out more information about the wizarding world, more than you all know now. A true inside source who can ask questions and not be suspected. I'm okay with that. I understand the motives, truly I do, the things I've learned already. Well, I can understand. But what now with me, sir? What do I do now? Mr. Steele leaned back, contemplative. It was a few minutes before he spoke slowly, as if weighing each word spoken. I suppose it is up to you, Harry. You have access to all my accumulated books and items. You can study them if you so choose. If we find you are staying with us another year, I plan on resuming the regular school work with you, Tiny and Mike. Math, English, and so on. Care will take his tests this summer, and his life is in his own hands. If you decide to participate in another ritual set, that is your decision. I will neither forbid nor encourage it. You know the risks well enough now. You have my support, Harry. Anything I can do for you. I regret any ill feelings caused the last few months. I would like to make it up to you. The man's face betrayed nothing, and he sat upright and stiff. Harry was not sure what he should say to that if anything was required. Well, okay. I guess that's it then. I guess I would like some time off to play, to enjoy being here with everyone just in case. Then, well. If I ever do another set, it will not be any time soon. I need time to get used to my own magic again, how it shines. How it works. Harry nodded again for good measure, then stood and began to walk out the door. Mr. Steele interrupted as Harry was about to leave. Harry, my son, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Harry paused and nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He left, silent. Harry walked through the woods to his clearing. The circle was beginning to grow over in grass and weeds, flowers sprouting up here and there. Within a few weeks one would never know what was there, what took place there. Harry was stricken by the urge to mark it somehow, but had no way to do so. Rocks, flowers. He snorted at that last thought, picturing himself planting pretty flowers in a circle. Plus, how would one mow the center? He laughed aloud. Logistics always seemed to ruin great ideas. Finally, he sat down at the edge of the clearing in a bit of thick grass. It was a warm day in May, and Harry was itching to try out his runes. He closed his eyes and looked over his magic. The light flowed forth from his heart as usual, spreading through his body to pool in the areas over his runes and tattoo. He let his wings come forth, watching the light uncoil from his core in fascination. Wings started as light, growing bigger and bigger, sprouting from his back, and then turning into physical flesh and bone and steel. He smiled, feeling like an artist who had just finished painting the perfect masterpiece. It was perfect. He turned his attention to the first rune, Ankh. It rested above his heart peacefully. All light seemed to pass through it and return, an endless circle. The resurrection of magic, a return to life to what has left it. At least this rune turned out exactly as intended. Mem was next. Centered on his forehead, light spread from it and seemed to set his mind alight. He focused on it, flowing into its light. It was like being a boat on the ocean, at once calm and tranquil, then dark and violent, crash upon crash upon crash. He came to himself with a gasp, heart beating fast. Whoa! He shook out his suddenly numb hands, and was amazed to see it was already late morning. How long had he been sitting there, lost in thought? With a force of will, he sat still again, once more looking inwards. He inspected Heth next. Time for a fun rune. He looked its light over, a strong star. He extended a tendril more of magic to it, seeing how the magic circled through Ankh and connected itself to Heth, making the rune glow brighter. Stronger, too, he imagined. That would be an exercise for another time, slowly building up the power in his runes. Could never hurt to have too much. He stood up with a smile, stretching his left palm face out. He made his eyes see the magic, observing how it worked. Heth! The light expanded instantly, a bubble of light that made his eyes sting. He squinted, concentrating on making it dimmer, and watched how a small amount of light was brought back into the rune. Not into the body, he observed, but the rune. He focused on making it brighter and brighter, until no light was left in the rune at all. Amazing. Finally, his eyes beginning to water, he drew the magic back with a quick mental snap. The light was now back into the rune, pooling pleasantly, a glowing rune of magic. He didn't feel the least bit tired. Technically, he supposed, the magic to sustain the rune was already present, so the only effort expended was the concentration to keep the shield in place. He wondered if it could be broken, and if so, whether the magic would return or be lost, to have to be replaced at a later time. He would need to practice making the shield weaker and stronger, bigger and smaller. A challenge, he thought with a mental grin, which would be fun to play around with. He sat down again, searching out the brother runes eyeing. They rested on either side of his temples, tiny circles barely half an inch in diameter. With his hair messy, they were practically invisible, but to his magical sight, they glowed brightly. He observed them closely, seeing how the active runes connected to his eyes in overlapping concentric circles. He reopened his eyes, stomach growling. He shook his head, standing again and walking into the center of the circle. Then he turned and looked back to where he had been. He saw a rock near the tree line, covered in moss. He concentrated on it, narrowing his eyes, and was rewarded as things began to get a little clearer, a little closer, almost as if he was moving there to look right at it up close. He saw the tiny sprigs of the moss, the textures of green and overlapping fuzz, and the tiny speck of a beetle climbing the mountain of rock. Harry! He turned to look, and almost fell over backwards as he saw deep caverns and hair, and he closed his eyes, frantically trying to make them normal. When he reopened them, Mike was looking at him quizzically. It's time for lunch, scatterbrain. Harry nodded, gulping. For a second he had thought some huge hairy monster was about to eat him. He made a mental note to never look too close at another person ever again. By the time Harry finished his chores and got back outside, it was mid-afternoon. He sat down again and took a deep breath. This time he turned his eyes on the sixth rune, Samek. It had by far been the most traumatic experience, even worse than Mem. His own magic, turned into a rabid animal to tear him apart. Not a thing he wanted to remember. He made himself make sure the light filled it, saw with interest a small connection between it and Mem. He had no idea what that might mean. His mind had not been terribly clear that night, and he had been afraid some unintended consequences would result. He looked closer and saw that tiny, almost infinitesimal strands of light spread forth from the rune, almost like a spider web, nearly invisible, to cover his entire body. He could only assume that that was the healing aspect. He had planned the rune to be a support, giving more endurance and health, but there was not a true way to test it. Time would tell whether he got sick again and whether he would heal faster. The last room, Zion, was almost the brightest, second only to Ankh and Heth. Its pool of light seemed to be in motion, but Harry was interested to see that very little light actually connected the rune to Ankh. He pulled another strand out, attached it to the rune, and the light seeped right back, not holding true like Heth did. He frowned, tried again, same result. He opened his eyes and stood, this time pointing his right palm outwards. Zion, nothing happened. Harry felt as if a bucket of ice water had been dropped over his head. What on earth? Zion, Zion. He looked into his magic, and the light coiled there, same as before. Zion, nothing. He grit his teeth, confused. Why would the rune not respond? He tried to think over that night. What had he focused on? A weapon, right? And a weapon it would, well, shoot people. He tried to think back. Had he said shoot? He had said attack at least, right? Oh man, what use was a weapon if it couldn't do anything? He grumbled to himself before giving up on it. He would need to look over his books again, perhaps ask Mr. Steele. He knew the rune was active, knew there was magic set aside. He would just have to figure out how to trigger the thing. And it won't work. I'm tried multiple times, racked my brain, and I cannot figure it out, Harry huffed, his shoulders shaking in frustration. Mr. Steele observed him a second before dropping his eyes to Harry's notes and the book of cuneiform. You said you knew the root was rest, correct? He waited for a nod before continuing. Well, perhaps it only works in self-defense. Or perhaps it only will work as a boost in correlation with another weapon. Maybe it only makes people sleep. Who knows when it comes to magic? I do not know what to tell you, Harry. All you can do is keep testing it. Perhaps one of the boys would agree to be a dummy. No. Harry shook his head glumly, though a bit of a smile tugged at his mouth. The boy's reactions to that particular question had been hilarious. Hell no. What? No. Only Care had considered before smiling and shaking his head. Is it worth the risk of harming us, Harry? He had had no answer to that, and had given up on it. Well then, I cannot say. Time will tell. Do not give up. Harry nodded and left the room with a sigh. That could have gone better, he supposed. He had been hoping Mr. Steele would have a magically awesome idea that would make everything work again, but no such luck. Well, at least Heth was fun to play around with. Harry smiled, expanding and retracting Heth. He could make it as wide as 5 feet diameter and as small as to cover only the space above his skin. Smaller than 2 feet, and it tended to warp, contouring to the outside of his skin. He could not partially fuel the shield. It was an all-or-nothing type of rune. He figured with some work and effort he could strengthen the shield so it would cover a wider area so that he could protect others beside him. Well, that was something at least. As it was now, it would not cover his wings completely. He was not positive if the things were magic-resistant, but he did not want to leave himself open to attack like that. He figured he would need at least 20 feet diameter to protect them in the air, though he could get away with 10 on the ground with wings furled. He considered his magic. He could probably spread a little each day to Heth without feeling too tired. His magic was mostly recovered already and was much brighter than before. Like a muscle, it was getting stronger every day he practiced magic, and his runes had made it grow by leaps and bounds. He tried to make himself feel better about Zion's failure with the thought of how great Heth had turned out. Harry looked up as Mike appeared in the doorway. Mr. Steele says come down. It's time to go over plans together. Plans, of course. It was now early June, and they had 2 months before Harry's birthday at the end of July. All the others were already seated around the dining room table. Mike and Harry joined them. Mr. Steele began. I have already talked some to most of you, but now is the time to get down some concrete plans and begin to brainstorm. First, the wizards will most likely not be hostile. Instead, they will send a letter or perhaps a teacher and a letter. At most, I doubt we will have more than 2 teachers show up. They will want to talk to Harry, probably explain the existence of the wizarding world, perhaps even a magic trick or two. Then, Harry will be given further instruction. This is the most likely scenario, and also the most harmless. However, I believe in being prepared. There is a chance that these people will instead attempt to take Harry forcefully because he is being raised by muggles. I have not been able to find concrete proof that all wizarding children are allowed to remain with muggle families. In this scenario, the wizards are hostile and may come in larger groups. I want to stress something here. Mr. Steele stared at each of the boys in turn. We will not attack them unless under attack first. Our goal is not to hide Harry from the wizarding world. Instead, Harry and I will go over contact options for him meeting up with us at a later time. Our goal is to protect ourselves. We have no way to hide our own minds. If the wizards capture Harry, they will not want us to remember that fact. We must instead immediately flee. He was interrupted by outraged noises from Mike and Tiny. Care simply leaned back, expecting. Yes, flee. We are no match for a wizard, even with those toys I know you are all practicing with. We can only hope to surprise them long enough to make our own escape. The minute Harry is taken, we will leave. I want us to be ready for this, even if this is only an off chance. It is not worth the risk. And remember, if any of us have our own minds read, then the game is up. Harry will be under suspicion. Keep this in mind. If the wizards come forcefully, we defend only and leave. The location we are going to will only be known by myself and Harry, whose mind is protected. Make no eye contact. I cannot stress this fact enough. That is the window to your mind for the average wizard. I doubt extreme talent will be wasted on us. Most likely, we will get bored wizards just doing their job, and they will not be expecting resistance. The boys seemed speechless, in turns angry and defiant, and then resigned. They knew what Mr. Steele said was reasonable. Mr. Steele and Harry sat in his room, both staring the other down. Mr. Steele spoke first. My mind is perhaps the most vulnerable. I know too much about you and about this project of ours. I could be your worst enemy if the wizards were to read me. I do not want it to seem like we are just abandoning you to them. We are, in our own way, protecting you. Harry nodded. We will flee to London first. If we are not there, I want you to memorize these 2 addresses. They are ones we can also be reached at. I do not know the exact means of wizarding mail, whether it is a spell to mimic owls, actually owls, whatever. Do not send unless certain it cannot be traced. If we are at one of the places, I want you to put in an ad in the London Evening Standard, worded exactly like this, short and sweet. He passed Harry a piece of paper with a short phrase. Enter in a meeting place at a local restaurant of your choice. One of us will meet you there. Harry felt a little overwhelmed. Sir, how likely is this to happen? I mean, you said earlier that you thought the wizards will simply be teachers coming to recruit me for their school. I said, most likely they would be. Look, I have more books that I do not keep in the main room, you know. I've shown them to you. Here is one. He passed over a book to Harry, The Rise and Fall of the Dark Arts. Even as early as a decade ago, the wizarding world was put through a civil war of sorts. A dark wizard set himself up as lord of the others and tried to make slaves of all muggle-born children. He was a pure-blood supremacist. Liken it to Hitler, if you would. Only got defeated by a miracle of magic of sorts, a small child who was in the wrong place at the right time. His followers were never eradicated, and many seemed to be in political power, old wealth and such. We do not know if the situation could have changed again in the wizarding world. I just want you to be prepared, Harry. He nodded, glancing the book over. Can I keep this, sir? I want to read up on what happened myself. I have been mostly reading books on spells and such, not history. Of course, my son, take this one as well. He passed Harry another book, not as thick as the first, Modern Magical History. Harry nodded and stood resolutely. Thank you, sir. Mr. Steele nodded before waving him from the room. Harry resolved to up his studies. The others were taking too great of a risk for him to slacken off at this point. It was time to focus. The coincidence was too great. Harry leaned back with start, his mind flying through the options. It did not make sense, but it did. So many things he had never considered, never put together. He did not for a minute think Mr. Steele knew. The man had never known his surname. The Dark Lord Voldemort, who must not be named, defeated 9 years ago on All Hallows' Eve, if it was truly defeat. The green light Harry remembered the details of Voldemort's favorite curse, Avada Kedavra, the killing curse, an unforgivable. A curse to separate souls from their bodies, to kill quickly with no marks. Never known to have been blocked before. Before, the red-eyed man in his dream, the darkness in his mind. Behind the scar, a scar given from a car crash that killed his parents 9 years ago on Halloween. Lily, Petunia's hated sister, Lily Potter, Harry James Potter, son of James Potter. It all made too much sense. How many Lily and James Potters could there be, who had a son named Harry, who died on Halloween, who was given a lightning bolt-shaped scar. How many? This changed everything. Everything. The wizards would not have left him with muggles if it were not for a good reason, and they would not have willingly let him go either. Did they seek to keep him ignorant? Was he in danger from dark wizards, hoping to finish what their master started? The possibilities opened wide, and Harry found himself on the border of hyperventilating. What now? Did he tell them? What did he do? The boy who lived, Harry James Potter. He walked as if in a daze down the stairs into the office. Empty, he exited, passing through the kitchen. Mr. Steele sat there, tea to one side and a newspaper on the other. He looked up smiling, only for it to fade at Harry's pale face. Harry slammed the book down, pointing wordlessly to the picture of a smiling baby boy, grinning toothless up at the camera. Harry James Potter. He tried to speak, couldn't. He sat with a thump just pointing at the picture, the name. Hero. A bloody hero. Mr. Steele looked uncomprehending. Then the man's mind clicked. It was almost audible when the light bulb went off, an aha moment. Eureka! The boy is a celebrity. What? My name. Harry James Potter. My parents, Lily and James. They died 9 years ago. My aunt always said it was a car crash. That I got that scar in a car crash. Sir. His breath came fast again, and Mr. Steele abruptly stood and gathered him into his arms. He made soothing noises, and for the first time in years Harry allowed the tears to fall. He did not even know that he still cared. He had always been told his parents were the good-for-nothing sort, marrying early, having a baby, drunks the both of them. Worthless, jobless freaks. Freaks, oh, how could he not have realized? What's wrong? Harry, the voice came from the doorway. Nothing, leave, Mr. Steele commanded in a stern voice. Tiny obeyed immediately. Harry made himself step back, let himself be led into the office, the door shutting behind him. Mr. Steele gently pressed him into a chair before pulling his own to sit across from him. He rested his hands on Harry's shoulder. Tell me, whatever led you to this? My name. I've always known it, had to know it for school. My parents' names too. I asked my aunt, she hated her sister, resented her. All I was ever told was negative. I was a freak, a worthless drain on their finances, a legal hassle and risk. They must have known, sir. Always no funny business, never questioning the odd things, only getting angry. They must have been forced to take me in. Why, I do not know, oh, sir. What does this mean? If it's true, and it's got to be, the coincidences, it's too great. The same name, parents' names, scar, age. Oh, Harry, I knew of this person, of you. I never would have put that together. This changes. So much I cannot even comprehend it. You are not the average wizard. You are not even muggle-born. You are a half-blood, I guess, a step up in some eyes. You will definitely be noticed everywhere you go and everything you do. And these wizards, if they put you there on purpose. If they do not know you are missing by now, they will when it's time for your letter to go out for you to go to school. And I highly doubt they will be happy with you being here, nor the state you are in. Harry shook his head, wordless. It was all too much to handle. Oh, Harry, my parents died for me, sir. It says it right there. My mother and father both died fighting against this dark wizard. All my life I thought they didn't care, that they were worthless. They were heroes. My dad, he was their version of a policeman, and Aura, my mother, was already a renowned charms mistress. I had a family that loved me, and it was taken from me. He shook his head. And now I can't help but think, what about that thing in my head? Was that something of this Dark Lord's? Will I ever know? And look here. He pointed to the page before, a showcase on the terror of the wizarding world. This guy spoke to snakes. It reads, one of the dark talents to speak to the cold-blooded denizens of the earth, a most evil-sounding trait, Parseltongue. And I speak to snakes too. Mr. Steele reached out again, pulling Harry into a hug. He sat stiff for a moment before collapsing in the man's arms. Is this what it feels like to have a father? He closed his eyes, and for a second let someone else consider his problems, make decisions. Mr. Steele gently pulled Harry back, tipping his head up to meet his eyes. It's going to be okay. Harry, do not worry about that. I need to get into contact with some other people. This is bigger than I ever thought. To have you right here under our noses. Well, to the wizarding world, you are a hero. They have books about you, many obviously false, but they will have expectations. I shudder to think what would have happened if you had had no knowledge of this when you entered their world. I will try and get a hold of some books on wizarding families. Your father was a pureblood, and with that came political responsibilities as well. I imagine you even have money laid up for you somewhere. Yes, let me think on this. We will make more plans later. Will you be okay? Yes, yes, I'll be fine. Don't tell the others, not yet. I'll tell them when I need to. All right, try to relax. Everything is going to be fine. Harry tried to keep that in mind as he attempted to finish his day. Soon as the others went to their rooms, he escaped out the door and into the night sky. He flew fast and far, not caring which direction. He soared over farms and houses, over Cheddar itself, a blaze of softly glowing lights and dark streets. He sharpened his eyes downward, watching dogs and cats and the occasional person walking about. His eyes could see so clearly, another side effect of Ayn now discovered. Better night vision. He watched a car drive down a quiet street, and it was then he saw it happen. A woman, walking from her car late at night, busy fussing with a purse, grabbed and cornered by two men. It did not take imagination to know what they wanted. Harry dived between one heartbeat and the next, the rushing air spinning past his face. He landed feet first into the side of the taller man, knocking him back and off the woman. The other man cursed, spinning, holding her ripped shirt in his hands, and paused, shocked. Harry could see the picture he made reflected in the man's eyes. A boy, winged in glinting silver and black steel. The other man jumped up, swinging his fist, and Harry's wing swept back, shearing it at the wrist. The man howled in pain and shock, collapsing. The woman cried, sobbing, clutching her torn clothes to cover herself. The second man cursed again, backing off, fumbling in his jacket. He pulled forth a shaking gun, pointing it in his direction. Before the shot fired, Harry cried out, "Heth!" The bullet went wild, not even hitting his shield. Harry did not waste time. Zion! Both palms held out, his desire clear in his mind. Protect the woman, protect, protect, protect. The magic poured from his right palm, the rune glowing, the magic arching in its Z-shaped pattern, an arch that ended when it hit the gun, blowing it from the man's hand. His arm was next, an explosion of gore and blood, ending when it exited his shoulder. He panted hard, heart racing. Both men were on the ground now, one unconscious, the first attempting to crawl away, cradling his injured wrist. Harry glanced at the woman, sick to his stomach. She huddled, crying, refusing to look up. He quickly stepped towards her, but she backed up, shaking and afraid. He heard shouting and the sounds of sirens. With a last glance at the men, he jumped up with a leap, letting the magic help lift him up and into the air. He landed on the building above and quickly emptied his stomach. He had never seen, never imagined, the thought of what that spell could have done to someone. It was so far beyond what he had wanted when he had thought of a spell to protect oneself. It had exploded, and his wings. He could feel the man's blood dripping off his left wing, and that sent him dry, heaving again in a corner. When he wiped his mouth and shakily peered over the edge of the roof and down into the street, the police had arrived. The woman was being wrapped in a blanket by a female officer, talking rapidly. Medics were attempting to help the two men. They were all obviously confused. Harry wished he could sharpen his ears as well as his eyes and know what they were saying. One was rambling in his radio, making violent hand gestures. Harry spent another minute observing the scene before he noticed that the sky was beginning to lighten. If he did not head home now, he would risk being seen in the sky. He quickly stood, backing away into the other edge, leaping off and up and heading back home. His mind was a rash of confusion. Close to home he stopped, finding a pond. He looked himself over. His left wing was splattered with blood, as well as his coat and shoes. He shed them and his coat, wading into the pond a little ways, enough to dip his wings under and rinse them quickly. He wanted no part of that man within himself. He then did the best he could with his coat and shoes, a quick rinse. He glanced at the sky and sighed. He would need to walk the rest of the way, couldn't risk flying. It would take at least an hour. If the others noticed him missing, he would be in deep trouble. Things felt almost normal now, as if he did not just cut off a man's hand and shredded another's entire arm. He had not meant to. He just wanted to help the woman, maybe scare them away, but then that one had hit his wing, and the other had pulled out a gun, of all things, and Zion. He glanced within himself, saw the rune glowing as deep as usual, such destructive force. What was the secret to it? Desire. He had in no way intended that result, that was for sure. What was that saying? The road to hell is paved with good intentions. What was he going to say? Should he tell the truth? Would they find out anyway? Harry resigned himself to walking back, setting a fast jog. He had a while to think about it. The aura on duty was thinking it was just another night. Muggle liaison office was never really busy, hadn't been since the end of the war and its aftermath. The occasional item or scared Muggle was usually handled by the misuse of Muggle artifacts office and their team of obliviators. So it was with surprise that he registered a call coming through on that odd Muggle device, the telephone. He picked it up hesitantly, this being only the third time he had had to do so. Hello. Yes, is this the MLO? That is correct. I need to register. Suspicious. Activity. Go ahead. The man described an odd incident of a woman attacked and her would-be rapists being attacked in turn by an odd-winged human who shot a spell and decapitated a man's arm and another's wrist. It definitely reeked of dark magic. The aura got names and coordinates, then began to summon the correct people. A team of three, two auras, and one specialist in obliviation and legilimency arrived 2 hours later at the small Muggle police office. They entered through the back and were led to a back room where a woman held a tissue to her face. The woman looked up, confused by their presence and clothes. The third man was inside her mind the minute she made eye contact, skimming her surface thoughts. The woman did not remember much, only getting a glimpse of wing-like appendages and a flickering light. She did not remember much. The man withdrew from her mind. Obliviate. He only left a vague memory of being attacked before the men ran away, scared by approaching police cars. We will need to see these other two men. They nodded and were told that the men were currently under guard at the nearby hospital. They apparated there immediately, traveling under notice-me-not charms up to the rooms the men were recovering in. The guards were expecting them and only stared at their strange attire before letting them through. Both men rested in beds, one asleep and the other trying to eat off a tray with one hand. The man glanced up, opened his mouth to question, and the man once more slipped into his mind. He was good at his job. This man, Frank, had seen the woman first. He offered to hold her while the other man, Donnie, took his turn first. He had been in the process when he had been knocked off his feet by a strong kick in the side. He had gotten up and saw a small man, or perhaps boy, his features unclear in the low light, with huge wings spread out from his back. He had tried to strike them and had barely registered the pain before he realized that his hand was missing. It had sheared off easily and cleanly, as if sliced with a sharp blade, an easy wound for the medics to stitch up. His hand had not been able to be reattached. The man had tried to flee, heard gunshots, and turned back in time to see the small man shoot off a bolt of colored light that had exploded Donnie's gun, hand, and arm all the way up to the shoulder. The police had caught him before he could crawl much farther, the winged human disappearing as suddenly as he had appeared. The man pulled out, frowning. Obliviate. He turned to the others, seeing the other man was unconscious still. It's not a harpy or Vela. It seems the wings themselves cut off the wrist, perhaps some sort of armored plate. Regardless, very dangerous. Not a spell I have heard of before, either way. There are some that perhaps could copy the effects with some creativity. Either way, not sure what we are dealing with here. Innovate. The man, Donnie, came awake with a pain-filled groan. The man was in his mind as soon as he cracked an eyelid, watching the event from his perspective. He too had not gotten a clear look, but had attempted to shoot in defensive after seeing the man somehow cut off the hand of his companion. The bullet had went wild, and the resulting attack spell had knocked him unconscious just after getting a glimpse of his arms ripping and twisting into a million bloody pieces. The man had not heard the spells clearly, though he could confirm that the attacker did not seem to have a wand. Wandless ability was rare, and usually limited to certain spells. A favorite of the attackers, perhaps, one of their own creation, he pulled out of the man's mind. Obliviate, stupefy. The team left after visiting each of the other officers on duty in turn, obliviating where necessary and filing a preliminary report with the Muggles. When they re-entered the ministry, they went directly to meet with their superior, the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Justice Pillywickle raised his head as they took seats, pushing his mountain of paperwork aside temporarily. Well, I'm not sure, sir. At first it sounded like Rosier, just his style with the expulsion curse, but after looking into the memories, this does not seem to be the case. That, and Rosier would never act in defense of a Muggle. Ideas. Dark wizard, definitely. Unknown curse, though it could be a personal hybrid created by the caster. Known to happen with these dark types. Does not fit any open cases at present. Motive? Not sure, sir. It would appear it was defense of the muggle woman, but that does not mesh with dark magic. Also, the extreme use of force, it seemed excessive. Perhaps a personal vendetta. It is unclear. I assume all cleanup has been handled. Yes, sir. Good. Keep a file on it, names, dates. We will be on the lookout. Should I assign a patrol, sir? I do not see why. We are short enough as it is to send a team for one small incident that did not even result in death. Let the muggles handle it for now. Of course, sir. Dismissed. Yes, sir. Once the men left, Pillywickle tapped his paperwork with one long finger. There were still a few Death Eaters that had never been brought to justice. Some for lack of proof, others an expenditure of wealth, and the last, those that were simply too good at hiding. Rosier was perhaps the most sought. The general public liked to think they were safe, but that was simply not the case. The DMLE force was too strung out and too poorly funded to adequately put on the kind of search needed to find the missing Death Eaters. And after the war, the people were simply tired of being afraid and tired of spending money and effort in fighting. They wanted to lay down their fighting wands and live peaceably. He wished he could let them. Tilda review, please. 12, if only. Author's note. For the sake of my story, I am going to pretend that the full moon during the winter solstice fell earlier than it really did, which was in 1999. It is very rare, only occurring perhaps once every 20 years. Also, the second runic set is in Greek, so though Harry speaks its Greek words in English, it is written with Greek letters. Google if you need to visualize. Enjoy the chapter, and please leave a review telling me what you think. Many thanks to GJ Mega for editing this. If only, the woodpecker sighs, the bark on the tree was as soft as the skies. While the wolf waits below, hungry and lonely, crying to the moon, if only. Louis Satcher, and that's how it happened, sir. Mr. Steele simply watched him. His silence was like a judgment fallen on repentant shoulders. Harry, I'm not even going to go into why you were flying over there. I do not think I need to stress the fact that you need to stay hidden. I've known you have been going flying late at night, and I figured you were responsible enough to take care of yourself. I understand that you saw a woman being attacked, and your first response was to defend her. But there are other ways you could have acted. You could have broken a window, made a loud noise, scared the criminals off thinking they were about to be discovered. In acting directly, you put yourself and all of us at risk. We will not know for a few days at least if the men were able to recognize you. It was like a slap to hear so casually how much he had messed up. Harry, relax. You said it was dark, and I doubt these men would believe the sight that greeted their eyes. The police will probably call them crazy. Perhaps nothing will come of it. From now on, though, you must be more careful. I will not forbid you to fly. I doubt that is even possible. But you must be more careful. You have a great gift. You can protect people. I wouldn't expect you to not try. Just think more carefully next time. And who will protect them from me? The question slipped out before he could bite it back. Mr. Steele looked nonplussed. I mean it. It was just my wing there. I knew they were sharp, I knew it. But when that man's fist touched it and I moved them back, it just slid clean off like a laser had cut it. I didn't even try. And Zion, it was supposed to just be a rune to. I don't even know. I'm in over my head here, sir. I don't know what to think. I understand. I doubt it was a pretty sight to see. Harry turned green just thinking about it. Harry, the fact that you even care about the so-called bad guys in this situation puts any fears I have to rest. You are not a bad person. You simply have power you are neither prepared to wield or old enough to consider the repercussions of. This will come in time. For now, you need to practice control of your emotions, your magic, and most of all those runes. This cannot happen again. Harry hung his head, nodding. Now go and get your breakfast. I fathom you are starved. He nodded again, reluctantly walking from the room. He did not feel like eating, but the smell of food quickly changed his mind. He tried to put the incident from his mind, but it refused to disperse. When he finally dragged himself away from the house, he walked farther than his usual clearing, coming to a small stream a ways into the woods. He didn't want an audience. Zion, nothing. The rock he had pointed at did not even show a crack. Zion. He sat with a sigh, observing his magic. It still sat there, calm as could be, trapped in his palm. He tried to think back to the trigger. He had been angry. Well, angry at those men for what they had been trying to do, had already done. Was anger the key? or anger on the behalf of others. Zion. This time a small bolt escaped, and the rock spread with feathery cracks. It was nothing like what had happened before, but he imagined it had something to do with the strength of the emotion. Or perhaps it was simply the fact that the rock was not hurting anybody. He sighed again. It was most definitely a weapon, all right, but it was one he would be reluctant to use, except in the worst of circumstances. He could have killed that man, might have anyway. The spell had exploded on contact and traveled like lightning up the man's arms. Knowing now what the rune did, he would definitely think twice about using it again, but didn't that make it useless? Perhaps. He would learn from this mistake, be more specific next time. And he would learn to control this rune, learn to control its strength before he killed someone. Harry entered the office, sitting in his usual chair. Mr. Steele handed him a paper silently. Boy, who lived defeats he, who must not be named. Apparently it was a very popular edition. Mr. Steele gave a sarcastic smile before shaking his head. The disturbance caused 10 years ago was noticeable to everyone. They blamed it on owls' changed migratory patterns, on drunken celebrations, a plethora of cheaply manufactured fireworks. Still, it was even in the news, and so few suspected it was anything out of the ordinary. But those of us who did, we listened. You, Harry, are extraordinary even by wizarding terms. You defied the laws of magic once. Whether it was your own doing or a spell cast by your parents, I doubt I will ever know. You may find out, however, when you enter their world. What did they say about me, this? It changes things, truly. You will need to be more careful, and this ups the chances that you will be taken from us by an exponential amount. I very much doubt they will allow a celebrity to remain with unknown individuals, despite what you say. This is something we need to talk about. Are you saying I should just go with them? What about the others? Harry, you must not worry about us. It is important for you to enter the wizarding world, and if that means living with a wizarding family, all the better. We have already came up with ways to stay in contact. It will be all right, I promise. Harry shook his head before shrugging. Think about it, sleep on it. However, the others will take it better coming from you. I know, I'm going to tell them okay, on my own time. Very well. Hi, Care looked up, smiled. Hi, Harry, you need something. I just want to talk to you, and Mike and Tiny too. You want me to get them? They are on their way here. As if summoned, the two appeared and entered the room, looking curious. What's wrong, Harry? That is, Mr. Steele and I have found out some new information. There is a great chance I will be leaving on my birthday. We no longer think it is a possibility for me to stay with you. What? Harry, what do you mean? Harry held up a hand, holding off the words. Let me explain, okay? Mike folded his arms, looking stubborn, while Tiny frowned. My name, it's Potter, Harry Potter, and apparently the Potters were very, famous in the wizarding world. And I am too. I was left with my normal aunt and uncle when they died, and did not know any of this. I am not a muggle born at all, but a wizard born. We do not think that the wizards will be happy with where I am, that there are reasons I was put where I was. We think they will take me back, put me with other wizards. The boys were speechless. Care spoke first. I guess I understand. Is this going to be goodbye then? No, that's not fair. Tiny whined. Harry's shoulders slumped. After my birthday, yeah, I guess it is. We have come up with ways to stay in touch, for me to get in contact, but it could be a year or more before I am able to get word out, especially if they forbid me talking to you, or even worse, blame you for kidnapping me or some such. They will not be able to take the truth from my mind, so I doubt they will look kindly on you all. I wanted to tell you so that you would understand. It's all right, Harry. Care scooped him up into a hug. Knew either way it went it could go bad. This school alone would take you 9 months out of the year. We will not forget you, though. You will always be our brother. Harry felt tears prick at his eyes and forced them back. He wouldn't be caught crying in front of them. When they finally left to eat, Harry felt much better. The boys did not like him having to go, but they would not blame him. And they had promised he would always be one of them, no matter where he went. They all sat around the table quiet. They had 1 week before his 10th birthday. Plans were scratched out on paper, stations established, emergency bags packed. It was a waiting game from here. They were all nervous but accepting. It was time. Harry watched the clock tick. He had a hood pulled up over his head, gloves on his hands. He did not want to give away his runic status if he could help it. Mr. Steele had heavily insisted on hiding it to keep it as a secret advantage. Harry did not much fancy wearing gloves the rest of his school years, but figured he could get over it. 11:45 p.m. There was a rustle upstairs, the boys nervous. Harry tried to keep his eyes outside, being the only one who could see magic. If they came cloaked, he would be ready. 11:50 p.m. Could time slow down? Sure did seem like it was. He unconsciously clenched dread, hidden inside his cloak. The dagger had to stay with him if he had to leave immediately. 11:55 p.m. This was killing him. Mr. Steele coughed, and he about jumped out of his skin. The clock suddenly chimed, and Harry's eyes flickered back and forth, trying to catch any movement. 12:00 p.m. Nothing. 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 12:05 p.m. He darted his eyes to the clock, then back to the yard. His shoulders began to relax. 12:10 p.m. For another hour they waited. Then Mr. Steele called most of them to bed, setting up shifts to watch till dawn. As if any of them could sleep, Harry tossed and turned before finally just walking downstairs and standing next to Care. Seems we got you for another year, Harry. As he watched the dawn light the sky in beautiful colors, Harry let himself begin think it was true. It took a good week for everyone to finally calm down. Once it did, they celebrated with a big birthday dinner. Can't lose Skinny yet, Mike crowed, grabbing Harry around the neck and fluffing his hair. Get off. Harry shoved him back playfully before letting out a hoot and taking off, chased around the table. Tag! Tiny jumped into the game, tripping Harry up only to be tagged in turn. When they finally collapsed on the living room floor, panting, Tiny spoke up. I'm glad you're here for another year, Harry. I don't want to be the youngest again. The boys smiled laughingly. Harry laughed, shaking his head. Whatever you say. It was a perfect day. Harry flew over Cheddar again. He made himself look, watching the streets. His night vision was extraordinary now with practice, picking up detail he would not have thought possible. When he saw the man, he let the wind bring him to a hover over the spot. The man walked alone down the street, head down and shoulders together. He paused beside a car, looking both ways, before pulling out a crowbar and breaking the windshield. He must have picked a car on purpose with no alarm systems. Harry dropped down, reaching into his pocket to pull out a bag he had packed for this purpose. He dropped a rock straight down by the man, where it landed with smack. The man jumped, looking around frantically. He reached urgently inside the car again, and Harry threw another, this time hitting the man in the leg. He landed on roof nearby, watching the man spin around again, eyes wide. He turned to the car one last time, and this time Harry's rock arched up and flicked the side of his face. The man cried out, jumping up and running off, looking around frantically. Harry followed him in the sky until the man entered a rundown apartment building. Harry took notice of the address, then landed on another roof. He carefully wrote out a quick note telling the scene of the crime, a description of the man, and the address he went into. He then carefully slid the mail into a secluded post box before taking to the skies. He let himself begin to wing back home, grinning. He had proved to himself that there was a way to help without taking physical action himself. He wanted to make up for the damage he had done last time, the violence. This might have been just a petty thief, but everything counted in his eyes. Criminals were criminals. He was going to keep doing this, keeping an eye out on the town, until he did not have to feel guilty anymore for what happened last time, until he could feel confidence again in his magic and runes. He would make a difference, and once more set the scales of magic in balance. He would not be evil. When September rolled around, Harry began to seriously consider another runic set. As bad as the last one had been, Harry was beginning to see the advantages to another one. This time, however, he wanted the whole thing planned out ahead of time. No more guessing, no more chances. He wanted to be certain of each rune. There would not be another weapon or defense spell. Heth was more than enough, and Harry did not want another mistake like Zion on his hand. One explosive lightning spell was more than enough. Instead, he wanted to improve something most wizards did not bother with, physical shape. He wanted to go longer, work harder, and start earlier than any other. He was going to be a lot more specific this time as well, though, than Samick, because of one side effect he had not anticipated. Samick had worked like a dream, healing any scratch faster than he could blink, making him slightly stronger and taking care of aching muscles and bruises. However, after about the third week of summer, something else became apparent. He was not getting a tan. He spent hours outside, playing and working. He should at least have taken the edge off that horrible pale skin, But nothing. We are going to start calling you Ghost, Skinny. Mike had commented sarcastically, which had brought the problem even more to his attention. Finally, one day, he simply laid outside all afternoon in the bright sunlight. If he didn't get a sunburn, it would be a miracle. Nothing, not even a red spot. Harry had checked over his rune, found it glowing steadily, its spider web of magic extended over his skin. Then it hit him, healing. What was a tan, anyway? A burn. The skin was burnt by the sun and slowly healed. Samek prevented that from happening. He groaned, smacking his head. The other boys just laughed when he explained, and a new nickname was born. After all, you aren't that skinny anymore, Ghost. Mike laughed, poking his belly. Harry frowned dramatically before throwing his hands in the air. Planning the next runic set took up most of his time. The other half was filled with schoolwork provided by Mr. Steele. They were all on a different level. Care was done already, and had taken up a part-time job in Cheddar, driving the truck to and fro. Mike was on his last year, and Tiny was 3 years ahead of Harry. Math came easily to Harry, as did English, probably thanks to his reading so much. History was boring except for some of the stories, and civics was a pure hassle. Harry had never been much interested in government, but he made himself study hard. He would need the comparison for wizarding affairs. Every once in a while, he and the boys would resume their games outside, with Care purchasing golf balls to take the place of the wooden rings. The boys would toss them to each other, play keep-away, and one of their favorite of what they were now calling war games was try to hit Harry. Harry enjoyed this the most, being able to practice utilizing his magic and flying at the same time. The boys enjoyed keeping tally of who could get in the most hits, and how far back the gold ball would bounce if it hit his shield. A few weeks in, Harry had added another rule. He himself would get points detracted if he unintentionally shattered a ball with his wings. He wanted to learn to defend himself with the wings, but he also wanted to learn how to keep from causing more harm than intended. The reminder of the man's wrist was still fresh in his mind. Harry grew stronger with each game, working muscles and reflexes. He went for a run every morning, trying to keep himself in shape for flying when it was not possible. He wanted to be able to fly farther and faster when he got the chance. His time to get to Cheddar was already almost half of what it had been as he grew taller and got stronger. At night, sitting at his desk, his new set came alive for him. Several times, he woke Dread up to talk to the snake about his plans, but it was more for a sounding board than anything. Mr. Steele still refused to help him plan for his own reasons. This still filled Harry with anger, but he was getting better at controlling it. He knew, reasonably, that the man had a reason, and it was probably a good one. Harry just wished he would share his thoughts. It was not like Harry could tell anyone. He would start the new set on the winter equinox, an event that was supposedly favorable for starting rituals. It fell on December 22nd, which would mean at 2 runes a month, he would be done around the end of March. This would give him more time to recover and get acclimated to the runes before his 11th birthday. All the boys had felt an urgency to spend as much time together as possible, all of them having the feeling that this was it. The last year. Harry focused on his new set, 7 runes to focus on improving the body. He would inscribe a rune on his left side for tolerance to heat and his right side for cold. He did not want to die of hypothermia or have sweat running down his forehead and into his eyes during a fight. Not to mention, he could get rid of that pesky coat when flying. He would have 3 runes on the back of his skull to improve his memory, his physical response time, and his mental response time. At first, he was just going to improve his physical reflexes, but when he thought about it, his mind had to be able to keep up with the speed or it was useless. Plus, thinking faster on his feet would come in handy. Memory was obvious. With the millions of wand spells, it would be key. Power was not everything. A smart wizard could run circles around you if you did not know enough counter curses and shields. The last 2 of the set he agonized over for a while, trying to decide on just 2 of the myriad of ideas he had. He wanted to improve his hearing, but that would take both of the 2 runes left. The same with speed and strength. No, perhaps his most pressing concern was being seen, found out. Not just his runes, but his wings as well. And finding out he was a celebrity had only exaggerated that fact. He needed to be able to go unnoticed. As great as Heth and Zion were, they would be the trump cards in his retinue, the last-ditch options, the secret weapons. He could not afford for others to find out about his runes, and heaven forbid come up with a way to block them. They needed to be hidden from at least the general populace's knowledge. However, coming up with a way to hide the runes was hard. A rune to hide runes seemed counterintuitive, and he couldn't help but think it would be flawed. The runes were not just a part of his skin, they were a part of his magic. Someone with magical sight might look close enough and see something was wrong there as well. How could magic cloak itself without just drawing attention to the problem? Gloves and clothing would work a long ways, as none of his runes were extremely obvious. Well, the lightning bolt on his forehead had had more significance than they had imagined. At least it still looked the same, and he was contemplating growing his hair longer to help cover the tail added on at the top, as well as the 2 eyes on his temples. Harry leaned back with a sigh. Sometimes he just wished he could be a normal kid. No responsibilities, no worries. He then laughed at himself. What was the point in wishing for such things? They only happened in fairy tales. Mr. Steele passed on several more interesting books on the history of wizarding spells, as well as language use in relation to spells. Most spells are cast in Latin, for one because it was a root language common across several countries. Also, it stopped spells from being unintentionally cast during daily conversation. Structure, the books quoted many times. It provided a structure. Harry was leaning away from Phoenician for his next set, but he still had not decided on their exact form, and it was coming up on October now. As he flew north towards Cheddar, Harry racked his mind for the actual rune designs. He was leaning more and more towards making up his own for this set. He was leery of any more surprises. He wanted cut and dried, to the point, step-by-step magic. No funny business, to quote his uncle. Harry saw the lights brightening and coasted around the outskirts. Most times when Harry flew over the village, there was nothing to see. Not since that first time had he seen any violent crime. He was beginning to consider flying back through the gorge, but he wanted to see something new. Now that he was faster in the air, he thought about doing some exploring of his own. There was no way he could fly as far as Bristol Channel, but perhaps he could see the Cheddar Reservoir or the big limestone quarry. The countryside was so beautiful. During the day, everything seemed so green and bright, and at night, the soft glow of the moon and stars lit up the ground in tones of grey and silver and black. He allowed his flight to continue around the town, staying on the outskirts. He flew over the beginning of the gorge and the angled east, following the town up and around before heading north again. He was now over countryside, and if he remembered the map he had seen correctly, he was almost to the quarry. When he saw the huge swath cut out of the cliffside, he slowed down, allowing his momentum to carry him forward, angling the wind through his wings to bring him closer to the ground. He landed on the top of the cliff face, looking over the landscape, Cheddar glittering in the distance. He knew that this was nothing, this height nor that town, compared to the larger world. At this moment, however, it seemed he had the world in front of him. He folded his wings and sat on the ground with a huff, his eyes taking in the sights. His mind began to wander, considering his problem. His book had talked about the pros and cons of creating a symbol of your own. It was harder, required more planning, but could be tailored to a specific purpose, and was harder for an enemy to guess the meaning of. Harry rhythmically thumped the ground, humming a tune as he thought. He pulled his wings in to stop the breeze from pushing on his body as he thought. He could make the rune a symbol, like a snowflake for cold tolerance. At that thought, he laughed aloud, the image of him having a snowflake pattern on his thigh suddenly hilarious. "What do we have here?" A snide voice, followed by snickering. Harry jumped to his feet, spinning around. How had he not heard anybody approaching? And why on earth did he keep falling into these situations? Did he have some sort of big magical trouble magnet pasted to his backside? It was a group of boys, kids really, about Tiny's age, perhaps a little older. Teenagers, he guessed. The one in the lead had spoken. They were dressed like typical kids sneaking out, dark clothes, sneakers, hoodies pulled up over their heads. Up to no good, he would imagine. Probably sneaking into the quarry for a little fun. Observing the looks cast his way, he couldn't help but think that he was about to be labeled the fun. "You going to talk, sneak? Why am I the sneak if you guys snuck in here too?" Harry shot back, eyes narrowed. There were 5 of them, one of him. Still, he couldn't help but feel that he had the advantage, an advantage he really did not want to use on second thought. Seeing the boys tense up, he realized that taunting them was probably not the best response. He inched closer to the cliff face. "'Cause we come here all the time, this place is ours." "Oh, lovely. Some sort of gang." Harry took a few steps back, and the boys responded by laughing and elbowing each other. "You don't have anywhere to run to, little sneak. Afraid." Harry swallowed a retort, though it burned his pride. He tried to think of a non-conflictive response. "Look, just leave me alone." "Ooh, leave him alone." That came from another gang member who made a silly face in his direction. Harry was seriously annoyed. He was not some little stupid child. Who did these people think they were? Did they just go around bullying people? He decided that his life mission from now on was to stamp the bully out of bullies. Once he figured out how to do so without killing them anyway, he backed up a few more steps until he was right on the edge. Worry began to shine in the eyes of the leader. Harry spoke up. "Please, just leave me alone. I won't come back, I promise." "Yeah, we will make sure of that." The other boy crowed and stepped forward, but the leader shook his head, pulling him back. "It's not worth it. He's just a little kid. He won't come back. Since when do you care, huh? He's in our way, you scared now. Don't want to hurt the itty-bitty boy." The boy's voice grated on Harry's nerves. There must have been some sort of wacky dynamic in that group. Maybe it was some sort of power play. In any case, the leader straightened, eyes narrowed, before facing Harry with a determined glint in his eyes. Apparently this guy had something to prove now. "Just come over here. We won't hurt you. Much." This came from a third boy, grinning. Harry considered his options. Run, they were in his way. Fight, he would hurt them. Get beat up, not if he could help it. How would he get home? At this thought, Harry glanced behind him. It was at least a good 200 feet. That would be more than enough. He glanced back at the boys who had stepped closer, grinning maliciously. The leader hung back, not wanting to participate, but doing nothing to stop the others. Harry met his eyes. "You are just as bad as them." The boy's eyes widened, and Harry wondered if he had gotten the message. Then he fell back into open air. Screams rang out behind him, but he concentrated on angling his body face down, feet straight up. Then he pulled forth his wings, holding them out straight, allowing the wind to flip him around and stall his progress. He kept close to the cliff face, hearing voices with shock ringing out from above. He grasped a hold of the edge's surface, clinging to the cliff now to keep the wind from blowing him outwards and into sight. The voices soon faded, heading in the opposite direction, probably trying to get away from the scene of a suicide, most like. He waited until the voices were gone completely before shoving off with as much power as he could make, aimed to gain altitude as fast as possible. He couldn't risk being seen at this juncture. He had decided. He would make his own symbols for what he wanted, specifically, though he would rely on the word for that symbol being in Greek. He spent the month of November drawing out his runes painstakingly and writing down exactly what he wished to accomplish. He went over the wording with dread and practiced taking control of the knife. He tried to remember to keep his humanity while inside the snakes, to not think in snake terms. That alone could change the outcome of the new runes. He spoke with Mr. Steele about starting the new set. The older man had agreed with his reasoning, but had left it up to Harry to tell the others. He was not looking forward to that, knowing they would not approve, but he felt it was something he had to do. Care. The older boy turned, smiling. Harry was struck by how much he had grown up, how much they had all grown up. Had it really been almost 3 years? "I'm about to leave. Did you need something?" "Oh, that's right. I forgot you worked today." Can we talk when you get back?" "Sure, okay." Care smiled and waved before heading out the door. Harry's shoulders slumped. Great. Now he had to dread that talk all day long. "Something on your mind, Ghost?" Mike's voice drifted from the doorway. Harry turned, meeting his eyes. The other boy seemed to sense his nervousness and honed in on it. His face turned serious. "You can talk to me too, you know. You don't always have to go to him." Harry raised a surprised eyebrow. He'd never thought Mike might be jealous of Care always being the leader, the one in charge, the confidant. Harry sighed and then motioned him to sit with him. "I guess. I am going to do another runic set." Mike did not immediately burst out with questions. It seemed the boy was growing up. He thought for a minute. "I see. Why?" Harry looked down at the table, tracing an invisible rune. "Ankh." He snatched his hand back before folding them in his lap. "I need the extra strength it will give me." "It's an advantage. Is the advantage worth the risk, the pain that you had to go through?" "Yes, I would say it will be. Also, I am doing a lot more planning this time. Nothing will be left to chance. I think the magic will be happier, too. It knows I am serious. It knows I know the rules." You talk like magic is a person or something with feelings. Mike frowned. Harry shook his head, unsure how to proceed. How do you explain magic to the magicless? It was like explaining water to fire. It is what you are not. I'm not saying magic is an actual person, but it does seem to have a presence of its own, a sentience. And the more magic being used or gathered in one place, the more sentient it is. That is why the ritual got more intense there at the end. But I have a pattern now as well. I've started on the path. I know now that the first set was the most dangerous. Not that I'm saying there is no risk, 'cause I'm not. Harry wanted to pull his hair out in frustration. Mike still looked confused. So, you are saying that you are going to, once more, cut yourself with tiny emblems to gain some modicum of magical power over your magical counterparts, risking death and certain pain, but it's okay because at least it won't be as bad as the last time. You don't understand, Harry burst out. I think I do. I think this blood magic stuff has you in its grip. I think it's making you want to do this. I know you didn't want to continue there at the end last time. I was scared, but it's okay now. No, it's not. They were yelling back and forth now, the volume rising with each interjection. What is going on here? Mr. Steele's stern voice came from the doorway. Tiny stared at his feet just behind him. The younger boy must have gotten the man when he heard them arguing. Harry sat back down, realizing that he had stood up at some point. He felt the fight drain out of him. I am doing the set. My reasons are my own. He spoke calmly to the point. He did not look at the other boy. You are going to let him do this, then? Mike asked Mr. Steele, questioning. Harry looked up at that, met Steele's eyes. The man stared at him, his eyes unreadable, before turning to look at the other boy. I do not think it is up to me to stop him. Are you not our guardian? Is that not what you are supposed to do, sir? Make decisions for us. Because from where I'm standing, you are doing a shitty job. Mike fumed, his hands balled into fists. Harry could not believe what the boy had said. He glanced quickly between the two of them as they stared each other down. Mike looked away first, red in the face. Mr. Steele finally spoke. I do my best by you boys, I always have. And when the times comes, I let each of you go on your own paths. Harry here, he has a different path than any of you to take. It requires him to grow up much sooner, to make his own decisions, and live with his own mistakes. I cannot protect him where he is going, but I can at least help and teach him while he is here. All of you are my family, Mike, all of you boys and all the ones who came before. I love you like I would have loved my own sons. I'm glad you are not my father then. With that last quiet, snide remark, Mike turned and left the room furious. Mr. Steele's face looked anguished before it was hidden by that calm facade again. Tiny followed Mike out of the room, sending a last accusing glance back at Harry. He wanted to melt. This was why he should have told Care first. The older boy could have at least helped him break the news to the others, and maybe none of this would have happened. It was impossible to take back words once they had been said. He turned to Mr. Steele. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean for it to go that way. I know, Harry. I know. He is only worried about you. The man sighed, his shoulders falling. He leaned more heavily on the cane that he carried with him. Harry spoke up again, earnestly. He shouldn't have said that to you. He did not mean it, Mr. Steele replied. But it still hurt anyway. Harry thought but did not say. The man turned and left slowly, and Harry was reminded of how old he was. The man still had a head full of white hair, but he walked slumped, leaning on his cane. There were more wrinkles on his face, and more spots speckled across his skin. Just how old was he? Harry leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling as his thoughts circled one another. Care took the news better than Mike, thought he was no happier about it. It took another good week for the boys to come to terms with the news, though Mike still refused to speak civilly to Mr. Steele. Tiny had hit a growth spurt over the summer, and was now about to meet and surpass Mike in height. The boys had joked around about giving Tiny a new nickname. Maybe Beanpole, perhaps, to which they had laughed as Tiny spluttered. My name is Benjamin, actually. The other boys fell silent, shocked. Harry was confused. He knew that the younger boy had always been called Tiny, but he had assumed that the others at least knew his real name. Hadn't they? Well, you will always be our little tiny whiny to us, Mike had quipped before grabbing the boy and fluffing his hair. The mood was broken and jokes once more abounded. Harry smiled, joining in. So, Benjamin, do you want me to call you that? Harry asked quietly after supper. Tiny looked up and paused before shaking his head. I just wanted you guys to know. Mr. Steele knew he had to for all the papers and such, for when I leave here and take my tests so I can get a job. But I like Tiny. It's the name I was given here, it's who I am. So what if it doesn't fit anymore? It's kind of like Little John in those Robin Hood stories. He wasn't little either. Harry nodded along. He could understand. He knew how important a name could be and wondered if he would ever escape the connotation of Harry Potter, boy who lived. He had no idea how people would approach him, react to him. If only he could simply change his own name and start over. If only he could be just plain old Harry again. Nothing was ever that simple, however. If only. He left the room with a wave, marching back upstairs to put the finishing touches on his plans. He would start the ritual again in only a week, and he wanted everything to be ready. This time would be perfect. Harry was rushing, reading fast, wanting to finish modern magical history before the ritual began to take him over again. It was in going through this book that he caught a reference that stole his attention. After the conference in 1919, whence blood magic was declared most unsuitable and illegal to the common wizarding welfare. Wait, what? He looked back, skimming over the paragraph, and beyond it, he looked back again. Illegal. The book was vague, giving no hint on what blood magic entailed. He finally slammed the book shut, fuming. He stood up, pacing back and forth. Should he ask Mr. Steele? Research on his own? Where would he start? He knew there were no books on law. The lack thereof had been gone over many times. Finally, he went downstairs, the book earmarked in his hand. Mr. Steele was in the living room, watching the evening news. Harry sat down beside him, watching for a minute. Nothing about the attack, Harry. Nothing odd, anyhow. We can only assume they passed you off as a drugged hallucination. Harry nodded, that attack far from his mind for the first time in over a month. He finally flipped the book open, absently tapping the paragraph as he turned to look at Mr. Steele. Sir, do you know, if what I am doing is illegal by wizarding standards? Mr. Steele turned to look at him. Finally, he clicked off the TV and waved Harry to follow him into the office. He sat gingerly in his chair, looking him over. I wondered if you came across that reference. Harry narrowed his eyes, suspension beginning to gather. You knew. It is only a suspicion, Harry. We do not know for sure. But you can guess, blood magic. It even sounds kind of evil, doesn't it? Or dark, as they like to say. If anything was going to be blood magic, I would say the runic rituals were it. Harry took a deep breath and let it out slowly, telling himself to calm down, to control himself. He could not afford to lose his temper. Harry, I thought it was worth the risk, and we do not know. You thought it was, sir. You did not ask me, did not tell me you thought it might be illegal. Be calm, he told himself. Calm. I told you it will need to be hidden. Mr. Steele tried to continue. As an advantage, a secret weapon. Harry clenched his fists, staring hard at the desk in front of him, unseeing. That as well, and who would punish a child for such a crime? Harry stared blankly at the older man, his anger draining away, replaced by a deep hurt. He spoke with a trembling voice. Because children do not know better, right? Especially poor abandoned orphans taken in by evil muggles. Mr. Steele shook his head violently. It's not like that, Harry, you know this. Think, this was to protect you. Do not doubt it now. So what we have a backup plan for if you are caught, it works, and you are blameless. Why are you so upset? Because, what if the wizards did kick me out? Was that your plan in the end? To tie me to yourself, an outlaw from the wizards, my only recourse to expose them to the muggle world. A revenge tactic. Mr. Steele began to get a lost look in his eyes as he lost control of the conversation, only helplessly shaking his head. Harry heard that sarcastic voice, Mike's voice, in his head whispering about politics and alibis and ulterior motives. Harry, I only did what I thought best for the plan. Harry stared, uncomprehending. Finally, he raised his eyes to the older man's. Why couldn't he do what was best for Harry instead? He wanted to ask. It probably did not even need to be said. Why couldn't you just love me? Mr. Steele closed his eyes, his head lowering. His entire posture screamed defeated. Harry did not feel like the victor. He felt like the victim, and he hated it. He stood purposefully, throwing off the sadness like a cloak to be put on later. I'm still going to do the runes. Not for you, not anymore. I'm doing them for me, for myself, and I will decide what to do with any knowledge I gain from the wizarding world. It will be my choice, mine. He spit out the last and left the room, returning to his room. Only then did he let the tears flow, blotting the pages of his notes as he sat at his desk. He vowed to himself to never be a pawn again in someone else's game. Mike was right about that. Harry was too trusting, too weak. He was asking to be taken advantage of. He pulled himself together, focusing on his notes. He only had a few days. Best to be prepared. It was rare for a full moon to fall on a winter solstice. Even rarer still was for it to be in perigee, the point in its orbit where it was closest to Earth. In effect, this made it look larger and more luminescent in the sky. For Harry walking through the woods, it looked almost bright as day. Even without his superior vision, it was possible to walk about without a light. He took it to be a good omen, a blessing of sorts, an affirmation. The past 3 days had been full of stony silences. The boys not liking Harry doing the ritual, Mr. Steele not defending his motives, Harry confused and yet purposeful. Under the light of the full moon, Harry pushed all of that away. It was only noise, white noise in the background of his life, his ritual night. He would start with 3 runes on his skull, one every 2 weeks. One for memory, one for discerning, one for physical reflexes. A triad making a triskelion symbol once completed on the back of his head. Too bad his hair would cover it, he thought with a chuckle. He entered the circle, feeling happy and carefree. There was something about this, beginning the ritual, the dance, which seemed so amazing and full of light. Perhaps it was simply the moon. How could this be dark? Then Harry glanced down at Dread and retracted that thought. The cobras hissed up at him, only a thought taken to wake them now. The dagger was much stronger magically now, some part of the completed ritual previously done imparted to it. At times it seemed almost like a presence within his thoughts, a constant hissing hum. A song. He knelt gently, dread twining around his arms, giving great fear in these troubled times. It was so bright. The light rising forth behind his eyes, spreading out and pouring forth, lapping along the edges of his body, circling and twining like a snake, holding him in its coils, in love, loving him. Master, it said. Master. Yes, Harry hissed, opening his eyes, staring into Dread. The snake's tongues darted in and out, scales gleaming in the moonlight. A frigid wind blew through the clearing, stirring his hair on the clear night. It would be sacrilegious for such a marvelous night to be marred by clouds. Dread hissed. Such great light, Master, that we have seen. One of many. The first of many, he answered, the hissing song tickling his throat as it too rose up, a snake song to the moon at its brightest point. He joined his mind to the dagger, let it shape his thoughts, let it rise up farther still. His wings spread out behind him, his power boundless on this night, this hour, for this purpose. His hair fell away at the touch of the blade as wheat sifted through by the wind, piece by piece by piece, exposing the skin underneath. For the first swirl in the triskelion, the first rune, Mnemosyne, Greek for a Greek symbol, the basis for muse and memory, a personified goddess to aid the gods. To aid in remembering, retaining, recollecting, retention. A swirling pain, swift, final, Mnemosyne, memory. Harry opened his eyes, his own, gasping. The magic took hold instantly, withdrawing into his body, exploring this new path, considering, taking its place. He smiled, looking up at the moon. There was nothing like this feeling of power. Reading took on a whole new meaning. He felt as if he had never read before, never truly grasped. He spent a day just reading a book, staring at the page, soaking in the information. It took him longer to read, but he remembered. He could almost see it in his mind, information made up of patterns and dots and lines. Wonderful. Darkness, a cloudy night obscuring a moon that could not be seen. He touched the knife to his skull, looking from another's eyes, his magic a bead of light sustaining the dagger's flight. Another swirl, another rune to aid him. A rune for thought this time, mental fortitude, quick thinking. A riddle solved. Enigma. Exhilaration, the completion of 2 runes of 7. Harry flew again over the town, unseeing. He was filled with it, the thrumming of light and magic. The night was open to him, and he cut it with his wings. He tore a hole in the wind. How had wizards ever given this up? Why, what had wand magic over this? A part of him knew, spoke of flexibility and usability and structure and risk, but the greater part of him now was filled with runes, and it spoke only one word, power. Harry. Care put a hand on his shoulder, and Harry fought not to shrug it off. Harry, we are behind you, okay? You can come to us if you need anything. Behind him, Tiny and Mike nodded. None of them smiled. Harry did not either. Okay. He walked back to his room, forgetting why he had come downstairs in the first place. Again, a full moon, the end of January. Snow coated the ground, rising hills of white. shining and glinting as his wings did, a cold, feathery substance. He fleetingly wished he had done the runes for temperature tolerance first. Oh well. The last in the triskelion on his skull, a third rune to complete a greater design, Greek as its root. A rune for reflex, for power and strength and force. To speed up his body to the space of his thoughts, a faster reaction, a faster response. So body would equal mind. Dynamis. When he woke up, his hair had once more regrown to cover the completed rune. Good. No more awkward looks from the others. He made himself sit up, swung his legs over the side of the bed. He saw dread out of the corner of his eyes, coiled around his wrist. He smiled, running a finger down the red snake. It hissed in pleasure, staring up at him, its eyes glowing. The green one nudged his finger, and he tickled its chin, chuckling at its delight. A cough at the door drew his attention. Tiny stood awkwardly, staring at the floor. His cheeks were red, as if he had caught Harry doing something embarrassing. He supposed tickling animated snake-shaped knives was pretty weird. He stood up, stretching. Is something wrong? Breakfast is ready. It's been a day. Harry stared blankly for a second before blinking in surprise. I've been asleep for a whole day. Yeah. Tiny dragged the tip of his shoe across the threshold nervously, shifting his weight back and forth. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll be right down. Oh, it's okay. I didn't mean it like that. I mean, we were worried. Okay. Tiny blurted out, then darted from the room and stomped downstairs. Harry followed with a sigh at a slower pace. Every lift of his foot seemed planned, every sway required thought. This would take some getting used to. How was this a benefit, exactly, he wondered as he looked down the stairs. He lifted one foot after the other gingerly, gripping the railing tightly. He got the hang of it once he reached the bottom and practically fell into the chair left out for him. You all right there, Harry? Rested up. Mike laughed, breaking the silence. Harry smiled, the expression feeling odd on his face. What had gotten into him lately, anyway? He relaxed and allowed himself to banter with the others, who gladly fell back into their old routine. It felt nice to have a normal breakfast. It took him a few days to acclimate. The triskelion must have interfered with the overall set in some way. Being a set of 3 within a set of 7, perhaps. He could find no references to that phenomenon inside his book and cursed his lack of knowledge. It must not have been the best idea to make 3 runes into the shape of one, but he had been following his instincts. Sometimes he felt like it was the magic that was guiding him. Was that good or bad? Was magic at its heart dark or light? Nothing had the answer. There probably wasn't one. The next 2 would be easy at least, and straightforward. As much as could be anyhow when it came to blood magic. Using life itself to channel magic was never simple, truly. This time, he reluctantly pulled off his coat and shirt before hurriedly whipping his wings out and around himself to block the bitter wind. It was snowing heavily, and there couldn't be a worse day to be outside in this bloody weather. He started to shake as he linked with the knife, hissing his commands mentally. The knife hovered above his right side, waiting. He focused, thinking warmth and relief, and please God I'm so cold, make it warm soon. Thermos. Warmth, blessed warmth, radiating out from the rune. It was not enough to block the frigidity present, but it took off the edge. He gasped as he hurriedly shrugged his clothes back on. He ran back to the house, feet barely touching the ground in his haste. Harry grumbled as he walked back out to the clearing. The last 2 weeks had been horrible, his body temperature fluctuating at the drop of a hat. 1 minute comfortable, the next steaming hot, the next freezing cold. If this next rune did not balance things out, he did not know what he would do. He knelt and again shed his outer clothes, dread already active and hissing. It had loved the warmth that he sometimes radiated and took the cold as a personal offense. More and more it seemed a true snake, but the blade always reminded Harry of its true state. It was an object, no more, no less. Please, winged speaker, do not bring the cold. The green cobra pleaded, the red one hissing accompaniment. Harry was beginning to distinguish between the two, the green being great fear, the red troubled times, or sometimes, in quick hissing conversation, simply fear and trouble. The snake seemed pleased with this, twining around his arm in happiness. Harry answered the question absently. I hope greatly this will cure the sickness. Well, that was one way to put it anyway. He glanced at the full moon, frowning, before linking with dread. It was almost second nature now, so naturally did it come to him to become one with the knife. as if the dagger was merely another body that he inhabited every once in a while, a vacation home on the ocean. Familiar, loved. He focused on his left side, let the blade rest against the skin, waiting, feeling the magic inside himself rise and wait with him. He felt the moon, his moon, full and shining on his upturned face. How she loved to bring forth the magic in him. He wondered if this was how a werewolf felt, singing praise to the mother moon that birthed it. The cold wind caressed his skin, bringing his mind back to focus. Cold, yes, that's right. A rune to bring forth cold to balance the heat. Always in balance, the runes must be always. Cold, a chill, a frigid wind. Sucrose. He hissed aloud in complaint as cold filled his body, and he quickly drew back from dread, separating himself from the discomfort the knife felt. Wait, felt. Objects couldn't feel, he frowned, and then resolved to think on it later when it wasn't so bloody cold. He shoved his arms back into his coat and hurried back to the house. He was surprised it had not occurred to him earlier. After the first set, Dread had done many things that did not seem to correlate with its purpose. It not only could feel the cold that it had the other night, but it also commented on the warmth coming from his body. He had thought at first it was just a figure of speech, but linked with it. It truly felt something. It could also see, somehow, through the jewels that made up its eyes. The knife was changing, becoming more real. Something was going on with it, something he could not explain. His own magic was changing it, turning it into something else. Now at times it seemed the snakes could, with only a little extra effort, actually separate themselves from the blade portion of the knife. If this actually came to pass, Harry was not sure how he would react. He would be shocked, that for sure, but also happy in a way. It would mean Dread was more than just a ritual knife. It instead could have the potential to be a real being, a friend of sorts, a companion. Harry laid the knife across his legs as he sat on the bed. He ran his finger across the scales, contemplating what he was going to do. There had been no clues in his books, nothing about inanimate objects coming to life. He hoped once he entered the wizarding world he could find out more, but until then he was on his own doing what he did best, improvisation. He narrowed his eyes and began to speak the lilting serpent tongue. Awake, serpents. Green and red eyes began to gleam, sentience growing as the snakes shifted slightly, falling into their natural sway. Fangs retracted and mouths closed as tongues slipped out, tasting, testing. They were beautiful, full of sparkling stones and steel. He wanted to ask them if they were alive, if they could be alive. Did they even have a mind? Did they learn and remember? Does lifeblood run through you? Does your heart beat? Two tongues slipped forth from metallic mouths as eyes gleamed up at him in the low light. Our hearts beat with your life magic blood, and will do so until there is no more. No more what? Harry questioned. He figured it was his own magic that gave them whatever form of life they enacted. No more heat, no more life, no more blood. Well, that was clear. He was stuck with the knife until he died. He had read that a ritual knife was only usable by one wizard during their lifetime, and a wizard could only use one ritual knife unless the previous one was completely obliterated. A hard feat to accomplish. Can you release the blade? A swift uncoiling was his only warning to move his feet before the sharp edge of the blade fell away and hit the floor, the two snakes twining about his hands now with hissing laughter. Seemed a sense of humor might be developing as well, Harry thought vaguely, trying to wrap his mind around this strange turn of events. He bent and picked up the blade carefully, the hilt now only consisting of a cross-shaped cylinder that the snakes had been curled around. What are you? The snakes reared back, their heads rising as one to look at one another, a strange mirroring effect. Then they turned again to look at him. We are what you wish, master. We are giving great fear in troubled times. I see. His magic had made them thus. He leaned back, raising the snakes in his hands to look them over. They felt cool, like metal against fingers. Their scales were hard, yet also supple. They felt alive, had a give to them that live flesh would have. He touched the dagger, its solid, hard blade. It was a direct contrast, what the snakes had been and what they were now. Even the colored stones had somehow been merged into their scales, looking more like living scales. The stones in their eyes had even seemed to develop a snake's outer membrane, giving them a realistic look. If his magic could make Dread truly alive, based on his own desire, what else could it do? Could it also transform Dread into a form that would make the dagger easier to carry with him, or perhaps even make it impossible to separate it from him? Hold the blade. He commanded, and watched as they complied immediately, once more twining about the hilt. Serpentine eyes observed him, waiting. Harry racked his mind, thinking. A spell, but one that he did not know if one even existed. But it came down to will, right? The language did not matter, this he knew, so will it. Harry brought out his magic, saw the shining path from his magic to dread, giving it its life. This was his doing, knowing or not. He had done this, so what was to stop him from doing more? He mentally grasped the light, trying to hold it even as it shined from between his grasp. Its nature was not given to being held. He tried to remember the words from the original binding, tried to envision his purpose. Blade of mine, flesh and steel, yield, yield. A command this time, a taking instead of a giving. Dread hissed, its hoods flaring, its fangs exposed, and he gulped as he felt a shiver of fear run down his spine. Shining magic inside it flared ever brighter as the knife seemed to collapse within itself, twisting, curving, a rictus of silver and green and red, a snake river of magic flooding into him, the sharp press of a blade against his heart. He opened eyes he had not known he had closed, looking at his empty hands. He stared for a minute before sitting up and looking down at nothing. The dagger was gone. He jumped up, spinning around to see if it had fell on his bed, but the knife was nowhere to be seen. His heart raced, and he looked over his arms, his legs, his torso. He could see no evidence of it on his person. He stripped off his clothes, looking for some sort of tattoo or scar, but could find nothing. Finally, he once more felt for his magic, looking over its darted presence through his body for a sign of the dagger. There, a snake-shaped constellation of magic coiled around his magical core, twin heads resting on two tails. Feathered wings rose from its back, and the name came to him in a burst of inspiration. Quetzalcoatl. Was this, then, what that winged symbol on the blade had meant all along? Hidden potential, a clue, waiting for someone to discover it. He spoke its name in wonder. Feathered serpent. Quetzalcoatl. The serpent moved, spreading wings, rising from within himself, rising ever out and out, light turning to steel the same way his own wings would expand. And that thought brought them out as well, feathered steel clashing with steel, and Harry opened his eyes to behold with wonder a changed dagger. The same blade was now clasped by a single silver feathered snake, wings outstretched in challenge. Green eyes to match his own stared up at him, its hood now consisting of long red feathers instead, its spine dotted with subtle red and green glinting jeweled scales. He spoke its name, giving great fear in troubled times. We were, I am. The snake regally replied, looking him over. Harry found himself amazed again at the wonders of magic. How? The snake did not reply, merely coiling again around the hilt of the dagger, content to watch him. Perhaps it did not know either. He found himself with more questions than he had had to begin with. Being taken into himself had changed the dagger's form, had made it into something that resembled himself. The patterns along its wings matched his own, and he wondered if it too could fly. Harry smiled. He did so love magic. And now he had a way to take the dagger with him in such a way that the wizards could not take it from him, no matter how illegal, how dark. It was his, the same as his magic, his blood, his soul. A piece of himself, and he would never let it go. The concept for the last two runes stemmed from a book he had read about camouflage in the wizarding world. It had been filled with facts about demiguises and invisibility cloaks, but also talked of notice-me-not charms and spells to muffle sound and blind enemies. To Harry, it seemed that he needed a spell to make himself simply be overlooked, to make himself look normal or as people expected him to be. A passive rune that he could activate when he was around the wizards or when he needed extra stealth. The first would be tied to his wings, so that if he was flying, people below would see him and assume he was supposed to be there, part of the scenery, just another bird or plane passing overhead. A sort of notice-me-not rune, much like the charms that made muggles ignore buildings that were right in front of their faces. The second brother rune would be identical, but tied to the physical evidence of his runes, the scars themselves. If he could not hide his runes from someone with magical sight looking, then he would make it so that they would not look at all, would not feel the need to look deeper than the surface. The only weakness with the two runes was that they relied on the person looking not being suspicious already. They could be overcome by someone whose will was great enough, or who knew something was supposed to be there. The case being his lightning bolt scar. Every wizard would be expecting him to have it, would be looking for it. It was too noticeable to be affected by the rune. However, if the wizards did not know who he was and was not looking for the scar, then it would go undetected. It was the best solution he could come up with. It would hide the presence of his runes and would help hide his wings and himself if he went flying. He was not sure if he was brave enough to test it during daylight, but it was a start. Once he got a wand, he would try to learn some invisibility charms and spells, and perhaps even some potions. Until then, this is what he had to work with. In his study of Greek, he had developed a love for Greek mythology. It was perhaps his only excuse to himself for the word he had devised for activating the rune on his neck, a notice me not like charm dedicated to hiding both his wing tattoo and his wings when he had them out in flight, Icaros. He had avoided the more common Latin spelling Icarus, going with the original Greek to match his other runes. He liked the look of it underneath the triskelion, how the Greek letters seemed to spiral down like an unfurled scroll on his notes. He drew it over and over again, tracing the outline, memorizing its every block and dash. He knew that he was getting obsessed again, drawn into the magic in the ritual. He also knew what had happened after the sixth rune the last time, and took every advantage to fly at night and exercise his wings. He did not look forward to losing his magic again. In his spare time, he read mythology, imagining spells similar to the magic of the Greek gods, imagining a wizarding world that sprawled across the mountain Olympus. He considered its truth, wondering if perhaps it was even true, for if magic could hide castles and alleys and villages, why couldn't it hide a mountain? It would be an interesting fact behind a popular fiction. His schoolwork fell behind, but it no longer mattered to him, lost in his world of ancient languages and runes and magic and flight. Those 2 weeks between runes 5 and 6 passed as if in a dream, and when he left the house on the night of the new moon, it was with dread curled about his neck, the Quetzalcoatl resting its feathered head against his cheek, its own wings spread out to mimic his own, the blade dangling down his back, held loosely by an errant coil. He walked on magic, breathed in magic, embraced the rise and fall of its tide as it carried him forward into the clearing, as it pressed him into the ground, lifted his chin, and he did not remember taking off his shirt, did not remember the passing of time as he stared up at the clear sky. Dread rose in his mind, his thoughts, and soon he was borne in flight in another body, flying as a feathered snake, so similar and yet so foreign, steel grasped in his scales. Thoughts not his own were thought, of hiding and not being seen, of passing unnoticed, of being the silent predator behind the still prey, the attack from above, the silent wings, the dark shadow on the ground. Quick slashes, sharp cuts, a blade touching skin again and again, a word, a rune. Icaros. Harry felt the moment the rune was completed, the light flooding in and accepting, and with it the limits on the rune of not flying too close to people, of not expending the power in the rune too much at one time. His wings stretched out behind him, steel glinting in the starlight. He wanted to fly, wanted to touch the stars with his wings, wanted to light up the world with his magic. Then it was gone. Everything down to the least feather, the dimmest light. Harry groaned, collapsing in the dirt. He felt an ache in his chest and rested his hand against Ankh. The stretched-out feeling increased, his magic pushed to its limit. It was almost too soon to add the extra burden on his magic, the runic sets too close together. He should have waited longer, he thought with another groan, rolling onto his back to stare up at the sky. He rolled his eyes around, looking for dread, only for the answer to prick his heart. The dagger was inside, locked in his magic. Not even the presence of the snake would comfort him the next 2 weeks. He watched the sky, feeling the breeze against his face. He was so tired and felt so lost. He had hoped somehow that this time this wouldn't happen, that the magic would sense his intent, know of his dedication, that it would not take itself from him again. He felt defenseless, powerless, useless. What would happen if he was attacked between a 6th and 7th rune? If he did this in the wizarding world, he could be killed, and surely the lack would be noticed. How would he ever do this again? He raised his left palm to his face, looking over Heth in the dim light. The sun was slowly rising, illuminating everything in a soft grey glow. He stayed for a few minutes longer before dragging himself to his feet. He could not let the others see just how affected he was. It was bad enough how he had been acting the last few weeks. He did not want to add this on top of it. In the next 2 weeks, he remembered he had a family. He spent time with the boys, worked on schoolwork, helped with chores. He ignored his runes, confident he knew everything he needed to in order to complete the ritual. He spent long hours talking with Mr. Steele about plans for the future and planned out his 11th birthday. He walked alone in the woods and made plans with himself. He wanted to be great, wanted to be powerful, if only so that he could defend those he called family. He wanted to find out the truth. He wanted to be a part of something good. Care broke the news to the other boys that he was moving out in August after Harry's 11th birthday. He was going to go back to London and run the furniture store for Mr. Steele. Mike was going with him after he finished his tests, and together they would complete orders and make new custom designs. Mr. Steele said he was getting old, getting ready to retire, but they all knew the truth. The man would be busy with Harry, with anything they found. Tiny did not like being left behind, but he was too young and unprepared to get a legal job. He had a few more years of schooling left, and only Mr. Steele could provide that. Harry hated the thought of things changing. The last year had been wonderful, had felt like having a real family, but perhaps this, too, was part of being a family. People growing up, moving on, just like Harry was going to move on, for a time. The physical distance would also prove a measure of protection for Care and Mike. If Mr. Steele was exposed, perhaps they could escape the fallout in the future. It would also provide Harry with another haven, another place he could go. Harry was not sure if he would take it in such a case, if he would let danger follow him back. Mr. Steele made it known that he did not expect Harry to return, not for a while, but that they had ways of staying in contact. Harry would find a way in any case. Mr. Steele made little known to Harry about his mysterious compatriots, but did let Harry know that in the future they would all meet face to face, especially when Harry returned from the wizarding world. Harry made mental lists of things Mr. Steele wanted, from books on law to magical specimens and potions. It would be years before they could make informed decisions, and too little information was known to even know how to proceed. Harry was instrumental in their efforts, but he wished he knew what their motives were. If he had seen anything, it was that muggles could have just as much potential for evil as their wizarding counterparts. Who was he to choose one over the other? He kept his thoughts from Mr. Steele. Finally, the moon began to brighten again, filling up the sky more and more each night. Harry watched it, eager, waiting impatiently. He needed this, needed it like he needed air to breathe, food to eat, sleep at night. He needed magic. The hour before it ends. How poetic, how justified, how right. Harry had spent the day alone, waiting still. Nothing mattered but watching the sky, waiting, always waiting. As the sun crept across the sky, shadows moving across the ground, birds singing and bugs crawling, a crisp breeze, clouds forming and falling apart, the world moved and Harry waited still. Namasani, the first in the Triskelion on the back of his skull. He spoke its name, spoke its place. It was dusk now, the light losing out to the night, the sun dragged down behind the trees, a moon hung low in the sky, rising. Moonlight and starlight one and the same, and his magic rose with it, an ominous presence, a gathering of constellations and light. Dread coalesced around him, feathers tickling his skin, hisses ringing in his ears, the snake a part of his life magic blood, his soul. Enigma. The second rune, a twirl of light. Dunamis. To complete the Triskelion, the threefold triangle, the trinity of the mind. Thermos, the hour before it ends, a time of preparation. Greatest light hanging in the sky, and his wings came forth as well, a rising tide on an ocean of magic, a upwelling, his runes beginning to glow with power, and it burned, a physical branding. He lifted his voice in a silent scream, his body charged and overflowing. His light was too bright, too much for him to hold, too powerful and free. It spun forth like a web of stars, anchored to his soul with Ankh, and he could see now how he would have died, would have fallen apart were it not for that one rune, that one necessary ingredient. Ouroboros, eternity, life, blood, sucrose. He tasted it in his mouth, a coppery tang. Blood ran like water from his runes, his hair caked with it, and he was so glad he had taken off his clothes because the blood would never have washed out of them otherwise, and it hurt, it was too much. Icaros. Harry forced his eyes open, forced himself to take hold of the blade, pressed the point with a hand against the center of his chest, right to the right of Ankh. Then he was no longer Harry. He was giving great fear in troubled times. He was coiling around the blade, taking it from the master's limp hand. He was controlling the sharp prick of the knife. He was inscribing a word over and over and over, the same word, circling Ankh more than needed. But it was necessary. It was a sacrifice of lifeblood magic, for the lifeblood magic, for the mother moon, the greatest light in this hour before it ends. To keep silent, to hide the inner soul, this thing which a predator conceals from other predators, the sharp pain, the slow poison. A secret, a hidden thing, only brought to life when it comes time to strike the softest place, to kill, to defend the nest, to slide and slither and be the king of serpents. Cruptos. Harry blurted it out, before dread could take over completely, before it could twist the magic more than it had already done so, before the magic light could take hold and turn him into something he was not, did not want to be. The magic returned to him at once, was inside him again, circling through the runes, purring and growling and seeking, counting. 777. He was whole again, one creature. One of many, one with many. Dread hissed, twining about his outstretched arms, singing with his magic even as its feathered wings, suddenly sharp, cut into his forearms, followed by fangs. And the pain was a bright light against his eyes, magic given and returned, an endless circle. Harry flowed to his feet, his wings silver in the moonlight, the black edges stark in the night, a brindled pattern that seemed to change even as they spread wide, a sharp beat of his heart, and he was aloft. Dread flew with him, its own wings reflecting light, a razor's glitter, a clanging retort. The snake's body glimmered green and red, its feathered crest raised in excitement, and his magic swept them both up and out, higher and higher, to a height he had never reached, and his lungs burned with the need for air. But it was only another pain on top of all the others and did not matter. He felt like a star, a rising star soon to fall, borne aloft by magic and life and blood, and he had never felt like this height of power. Is this darkness? Is this evil? His mind followed the thought as a dog followed a rabbit's scent across the grass and sky. This was magic, darkness and light, the two intertwined together, and one without the other would not exist, and he was there inside it for a moment, and it loved him. He was let down gently, the way a broken bird is set on the ground, wings pinned against its limp body. He was wasted, wrung out, used up. His eyes still saw, though he could not move, and dread was still and silent against his chest, only the rise and fall of its chest belying life, and since when had it needed to breathe? He closed his eyes and smiled, feeling a soft caress against his magic, the mother moon's last touch as she left the sky, thanking him for his flight, his journey, his sacrifice, and letting the sun rise to take her vigil in the sky. A sun which bore down on him, hot and burning, a stern father whose magic he had not felt until now, he a creature of the night, and not given to sunlight. So different, so judging, so set in its ways. It had its own way of turning, its own seasons and swellings, and it reminded him of that with a hot brand against his chest. Ankh turned to fire. It would not be ignored. "Harry," he gasped, opening his eyes at the voice. "Oh my God, Harry, Harry, can you hear me? Harry." He looked up into Mike's panicked face and wondered what had gotten the normally stoic boy so upset. Mr. Steele sat at his computer, staring at the screen blankly. The chat window was open, all members present. A tiny glowing green icon blinked steadily, signaling that the session was live. Blink, the boy, blink, blink. Blinky came through fine. Fine. That was one thing to call the battered and broken body they had carried upstairs, which care had painstakingly washed of blood, Tiny crying in the background. Harry had not woken besides a few moments of lucidity when they first found him, rambling about stars and the moon and the sun and the balance of magic. They assumed the ritual had worked, given that Harry was still alive, still had his magic. The odd dagger was different, changed into some feathered snake, which hissed at them and stayed coiled beside Harry on the bed, the blade itself nowhere to be seen. Blink, blink, do we proceed? Blink. Yes. Yes, they would, because what else then had it been for, all the pain, all the planning? None of the boys would look at him. They blamed him for getting Harry into this mess, for leading him down this path. But it was Harry's choice. And under the blood and exhaustion the boy was fine. No wounds, no bruises, no broken bones or skin. Harry had wanted this, had planned it out. Blinky thought of the spider web of scars across Harry's arms, of the runes that he couldn't quite see, that were now hidden from even his sight, and all but invisible to the others. Harry had done well, had pulled it off. They were ready. We are ready on our end. Blink, here as well. We will wait for report on first contact. Blink. What was he supposed to say? That he couldn't wait. He was so happy to be this close that he was thinking of backing out, of taking the boy and hiding him somewhere safe, where no man or muggle or wizard could hurt him, of giving him back his innocence, his happiness, his childhood. And what then? If only he had thought this through before, if only he had not been so certain, so selfish, so obsessed. Blink, 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 blink. July 31st. A question, a query. Are you serious? Are you certain? Is this the right path? Blink, blink. No time for regrets now. It was too late to turn back. He typed the last agreement, expounding, his heart pounding, tears pooling at the edge of his old, tired eyes. He rested his head against his palms, silent heaves racking his bent body. Blink. Yes. Blink. And again he typed a last word, a last sin against the small boy upstairs, who knew no better, who he had led and manipulated to this outcome, whom he loved, but not enough. Not enough, he admitted to himself again. Never enough. Midnight. Blink. The green light dimmed, fading to yellow, then steadily glowing red. In a forest deep in the heart of Albania, a dark spirit crouched in possession of a common adder. The snake hissed, rearing back to taste the air. Darkness, another part of a broken spirit, approached from the sky, swirling down into the clearing. For a second the two sized each other up, thoughts echoing back and forth, an endless repeating cycle, a mirror turned upon itself. The snake struck, passing through into the darkness, which curled forth and sunk into its skin. A scream. The snake began to smoke, fire burning it up from the inside, its scales rippling and melting from its bones. The darkness left with a hiss, bigger than before, swollen with another part of its soul. Stronger now, yes. Need a bigger body, yes. Thoughts swirled around, half-formed and fleeting. Combined, the darkness rose, seeking, plans beginning to form at a faster pace, looking for a victim to possess. A distant fire, smoke curling into the night sky, drew its attention. Yes. Tilda, review please.